Chapter 2296. Pinch me. See if my eyes are playing tricks on me. Brother, you're not playing tricks on me. I saw it too. Purple talisman. Purple talisman. Thank God. He was lucky enough to see a legendary purple talisman in this life. Oh. This was a great opportunity. Oh. Brother, you're so excited that you're stuttering. Phew. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief. If not for the two peerless purple talismans that she had drawn, it would have been difficult for her to store these two gigantic fellows. She could not send them to Fish Orchid Planet in front of everyone. Miss Chiao, you're so capable. The smile on Hua Qingyu's face deepened. He was certain that Miss Chiao was someone with great magical powers. If not, the mansion master would not have cared so much about her. The message on the communication jade talisman was urgent. He had to take care of this and let Miss Chiao return with satisfaction. Actually, he should have known earlier, shouldn't he? When he had first met her, he had thought that she was just an ordinary girl from the lower star region. He did not expect that she would be so good at using talismans when she was angry at the beautiful fairy from the Palace of Cold Blood at the city gate. She was such a young great talisman master. It was true that the younger generation would surpass the older generation. The younger generation would surpass the older generation. Where's the food you were talking about? Miss, this way please. Hua Qingyu hurriedly extended his hand and led her to the granary. Arbor took out two blue talismans and kept the food for the two land whales. Then, she nodded in satisfaction. Do land whales like fish? Yes, they like fish the most. Can this dried fish last them for a year? If it's dried fish, I'm afraid the land whales will get sick of it. Hua Qingyu said helplessly. Raw fish was not easy to prepare, so he had prepared these as backup food. How about we put them into the sea? That would naturally be for the best. Hua Qingyu nodded quickly and added, land whales move very fast. If we put them into the sea, Miss Chiao, you have to be careful not to let them escape. Oh, Hua Qingyu said with a smile. In addition, there is a high-level spirit beast crystal core placed in the lower abdomen of these two land whales to suppress it. It's best not to remove it. Otherwise, the land whales won't listen to orders and might run around. After all, it was a spirit beast with intelligence. Arbor waved his small hand. Thank you for your trouble, City Lord Hua. I still have matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. Okay. See you off Mississippi. Hua Qingyu bowed respectfully. When he looked up, he saw that the energetic little girl had already summoned a huge blue bird and flew off into the distance with the 8 young men who were with her. Lu Tiantian exclaimed, She didn't pay. Everyone looked at her with disdain. Wasn't this girl's focus a bit strange? Seeing City Master Hua cupping his hands and bowing politely, how could he possibly ask the little girl for money? The 2 land whales and so much food must have been given to him by the Julu city lord for free. Ridiculous. Su Bang looked at Lu Tiantian angrily. He felt that this woman was embarrassing him in every way. She was not at all as decent and gentle as Chun Hanyu. As the team leader, Su Hao naturally felt awkward. He tried to persuade Princess Lu and said, We've been out for a long time. We have to return to the academy as soon as possible. Chapter 2297. Yellow Crane. After hurrying back to Shuntian Prefecture for 2 consecutive days, Xiao Mu found a certain yellow crane that was in closed-door seclusion to refine pills, and was in a deranged state. The moment he kicked the door open, he smelled a moldy and sour smell that drifted over with the wind. Arbor immediately blocked his 5 senses with an expressionless face. The inn's waiter pinched his nose and followed behind Arbor, shouting, Sir, your friend is simply crazy. Ever since you left, these 10 to 20 days, she didn't leave the house and only ate 1 meal a day. Our innkeeper almost thought that she was going to die in this room. Arbor, that fairy yellow crane was paralyzed on the ground. Beside her was a yellow cauldron refining pill furnace, which was emitting a charred smell. In any case, Arbor didn't smell anything and didn't know what it was. The inn's waiter behind her immediately fainted from the smell and fell heavily on the ground. Arbor, that why the hell did he feel that this scene was actually a little funny? Yellow crane. If you're not dead, hurry up and get up. Fairy Yellow Crane seemed to hear a familiar voice in a daze. She opened her eyes and looked blankly. Then, she suddenly straightened her body like a corpse and rolled to hug Arbor's ankle, crying out, "Jojo, you're here to save me. Ah, you're finally back. I've been refining a level 8 spirit breakthrough pill, and failed repeatedly. I'm simply going crazy. You are just a black level alchemist with meager cultivation. What do you need a level 8 spirit breakthrough pill for?" Xiao Mu exerted all her strength to pull her legs out from her two suffocatingly smelly arms. However, Fairy Yellow Crane was hugging a pillar, refusing to let go no matter what. Jojo, if I can't refine a level 8 spirit breakthrough pill in this life, I won't be able to live. Arbor suddenly felt like he had made friends carelessly and suffered 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Could this Joker be any more funny? Get up. Go take a bath right now. Arbor felt that his broken voice could probably shake the entire and "You're so fucking smelly that I can't even block my 5 senses anymore." After the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn, Fairy Yellow Crane, who had washed herself clean and regained her beautiful appearance in the past, slowly walked out from behind the screen while holding a strand of wet hair. Jojo. Fine. Arbor stretched out his hand to block her flying figure. Take this alchemy book and study it yourself. I'll send you to a place. The time there is 12 times slower than the outside world. That should be enough for you to succeed. I'll call you out when we reach the divine land. 12 times. Fairy Yellow Crane stared at her in a daze, feeling as if she had heard fake news. The divine land? Yes. I came back to pick you up this time. Arbor curled his lips. Wait until we go to Shenzhou. When the time comes, I'll let you out. For the time being, you can stay in my... Arbor shut his mouth, speechlessly looking at a certain someone who was holding the alchemy book and immersing herself in it. This Joker. Arbor stretched out his hand to write a note and pressed it against Fairy Yellow Crane's forehead, asking Little Tree to send her to the Fish Orchid planet. He found a desolate island on the sea and threw her there, letting her immerse herself in alchemy cultivation. 20 days passed on the Fish Orchid planet, but the actual time was only 40 hours. On the small desolate island with dense spirit chi, Fairy Yellow Crane finally succeeded in refining a level 8 spirit breakthrough pill. She jumped up in excitement. Wow, success! Chapter 2298. When she jumped, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Why was she stepping on a thin white beach? Surrounded by water, what was going on? Was this an island? Fairy Yellow Crane spent another day, 2 hours in the outside world, to run one round around the island. She hugged the tree and screamed in horror. This is a deserted island? Why am I the only one here? Yellow Crane's heart was filled with curses. This was actually a deserted island? Jojo. Where am I? Fairy Yellow Crane screamed for a while, then looked up slightly and took down a piece of paper stuck on her forehead. She saw a line of delicate words written on the paper. Don't panic when you encounter something. Just call out Sir Jojo. Was he trying to tease her? He looked at the lousy piece of paper over and over with a dumbfounded expression. He tried to circulate his chi and let out a high-pitched scream. Lord Xiao. What responded to her was a flock of birds flying away in fright. Little Yellow Crane has woken up. Arbor sat on the beach and watched Little Tree grill fish virtuously. His eyes were fixed on Emolien, who had been in seclusion refining for a long time without any movement. Poor child, she must have been frightened. Arbor took the grilled fish that Little Tree handed over and took a small bite. It was so hot that his tongue shrank back. Speaking of which, where did you throw her to? The last time she came in, she did not sense Yellow Crane's position that he threw her too far away. On the island. There are many small islands like this in the sea. I threw her on one of the deserted islands. Surrounded by the sea, the environment is beautiful. Little Tree waved his branches and said excitedly, Master, you said before that you can't let her furnace explode every 2 to 3 days and affect the senior sister's cultivation. Arbor's mouth twitched. Then I'll write a letter, pass it to her. Master, you can write. Arbor took out a pen and paper from his inner world, casually wrote a few lines, stuffed the letter into an envelope, and threw it to the small tree. Yellow Crane, don't panic. Just stay on the uninhabited island for a while. Qiuqiu will bring you food every day, so don't worry. This place's spiritual energy is rich and will be greatly beneficial to your alchemy cultivation. Oh, remember to take a bath. Signed, Jojo. Sama. Arbor threw out the 2 purple talismans and walked to the beach. He opened the talismans and took out 2 super large land whales. Wait. Arbor leaped onto one of the land whales. He raised his hand and sucked the high-grade spirit beast's crystal core out of the whale's belly. The 2 land whales immediately jumped into the sea happily. They slid their huge bodies and gradually sank into the sea. Xiaomu squatted on a rock that had been polished by the seawater until it was round and smooth, and she gazed into the water with curved eyes. Suddenly, she heard a thunderous voice. A land whale poked its head out of the sea and nodded at her in greeting. Arbor waved his little hand, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. Little Tree at the side huffed at the 2 branches and cursed in his heart. Isn't it just big and strong? It actually made Little Master so happy. Humph, humph, humph. When Little Tree grows up, it will become the only super large tree that can support the sky and earth. At that time, humph, humph, nothing in this world can surpass Qiuqiu. Qiuqiu is Little Master's strongest reliance. Xiaomu tilted her small head. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed something, and she hastily turned her head around. She then saw the motionless Emolian slowly opening his phoenix eyes. Chapter 2299. Underworld Region's Great Yong City's Jingyuan Hall. The newly issued edict to establish the Crown Prince still caused the courtiers to whisper to each other. Everyone secretly cast their gazes on the 3rd prince, Mingyasi, who was standing in front of the hall with a grave and stern expression. This 3rd prince, who had just returned home a few days ago, was indeed worthy of being the son of the imperial noble consort. In just a short period of time, he had won the favor of the emperor and established a new crown prince. This action made all the courtiers feel like it was child's play. After all, the emperor didn't inform anyone about the matter of deposing the crown prince, nor did he discuss it with the courtiers. He directly made the decision in the middle of the night. The underworld region's emperor, draped in a thick fur cloak, wrapped himself up like a winter melon, and slumped on the throne. He spoke listlessly, as if he was on his last breath. If there's nothing else to discuss, the court is dismissed. Your Majesty. An official in the front row suddenly strode forward and knelt down. The underworld wolf crown prince is wrongly accused. One of your Majesty's accusations against him is that he doesn't know how to be filial. This is extremely laughable. Lord Kong, an old courtier, who stood in the front row on the left, had a head full of white hair, but his berating voice was full of energy. Prime Minister Bu, there's no need to admonish me. I know my limits, Lord Kong said with tears streaming down his face. I also don't want your Majesty to be fooled by scoundrels and mistakenly depose the crown prince. Bold, bold. The underworld region's emperor straightened his body, trembling as he picked up a piece of jade and smashed it at Lord Kang's head. Pacha. The jade fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. Lord Kang's face was deathly pale, but he couldn't stop himself from kowtowing repeatedly. He continued, the underworld wolf crown prince's filial piety can express the heavens, the earth, the sun and the moon. For the past 3 years, the underworld wolf crown prince has assisted your Majesty in handling government affairs, and has been cautious and conscientious, not daring to make the slightest mistake. Furthermore, the underworld wolf crown prince said that this year, he would go to the heavenly snow region for your Majesty, and pluck the snow region's divine flowers to nourish your Majesty's body. Everyone knows what kind of place the heavenly snow region is. That's a place of extreme cold, where danger lurks within 100 chi radius. The underworld wolf crown prince must have great determination and courage. How much he loves your Majesty to dare to go to such a place to pluck the snow region's divine flowers for your Majesty. Shut up. The underworld continent's emperor shouted angrily as he slammed his hand on the dragon throne. That's enough, Lord Kong. The courtiers also tried to persuade him. What Lord Kong means is that you're going to use the Snowland divine flower to express your love and respect for Imperial Father? Ming Yasi suddenly asked with a cold expression. His voice was low and elegant, and it revealed an indescribable tension. It seemed as if as soon as he spoke, it caused everyone present to want to go silent like cicadas in winter. This third prince was tall, handsome and domineering. As soon as he returned, he seized the position of crown prince. Sure enough, compared to the nether wolf crown prince who was indecisive and had a weak character, his attitude was much more unyielding. Lord Kong lay on the ground, his forehead firmly pressed against the ground as he wailed bitterly. The underworld wolf crown prince's pure filial piety can move the heavens and move the earth, can illuminate the sun and moon. Shut up. The Dark Continent's emperor coughed repeatedly, drowning out his angry roar. Ming Yasi took a step forward and knelt on one knee. He raised his head and looked sharply at the emperor on the throne. Imperial father, since the courtiers have said so, as your son, I naturally can't shrink back in the slightest. Please allow Imperial Father to allow me to lead 2,000 soldiers to the heavenly snow region's divine flowers to nourish your majesty's body. Fragmented Memories. Chapter 2300. His lotus was in closed-door foraging mode. He was awake. Like a tiger cub foraging for food, Xiaomu pounced into Emolien's embrace with a swish. The latter smiled and hugged her waist. Looking down at her, he said softly, Jojo, were you waiting for your husband here? Arbor nodded his little head vigorously. Master Jojo, a trembling voice came from the sky, instantly dispersing the blurry atmosphere. Emolien was speechless. Strange, why did it sound so much like Huang He's voice? Arbor pulled Emolien with one hand and turned to walk towards the beach. Lotus, when you were foraging, I picked up 2 land whales. Do you want to take a look? It's fun. The little one pulled his hand and walked to the beach. Stepping on a rock, she shouted, Big whale. The sea was very calm without any waves. 2 minutes later, there was a huge whirlpool on the sea. A huge land whale emerged from the water and looked at the couple on the shore with its lantern-like eyes. Arbor took out an arm-length dried fish from his inner world and threw it across the sea. The land whale spat out saliva and caught the dried fish. Munching on it, it sank to the bottom of the sea. Miss Chiao pursed her lips, unable to hide her smile. Looking up at Emolien, she said, It's fun. When the little fellow raised his head, he happened to see the man staring at him without blinking. His voice slowly lowered. Why are you looking at me without blinking? My Jojo, you look good. Emolien reached out to caress her cute little face and pulled her into his arms. He just hugged her without saying a word. Actually, he was very happy. This little one had completely let down her guard in front of him. In that instant, she revealed the delicate side of a little girl, revealing a little bit of her childlike innocence. He hoped that she could be like this now, smiling like a flower forever. No matter where she went, he would protect her and ensure her safety. Pung. A black ferrule appeared in Emolien's hand and quietly laid horizontally in his palm. It looked exactly the same as before, but Arbor felt his heart ripple with excitement, as if Inky, the ruler, was calling out to him. Pick it up, pick it up. Arbor stretched out her hand, and the black ferrule jumped into her hand with a whoosh. It was about 5 inches long and 2 inches wide. Ink flowed on it, and its brilliance dimmed. As soon as he held Arbor in his hand, he felt an unusual surge of power. Collect! With a thought, the ferrule melted into her palm. Her body was instantly infused with a mysterious power. It was as if there was no need for words between her and the ruler. Just like that strange startled swan dagger, as long as a thought flashed through his mind, it would immediately launch an attack outwards. Bang! A bright blue flame ignited in Arbor's palm. The flame was so blue that it was quiet and intense. The light was so dazzling that she closed her eyes slightly. This is the 8th grade blue spiritual cleansing fire. Emolien must be satisfied as well. He curled the corner of his lips and said, Only a high-level 5 spirit source above the 7th grade can give it a name. The Heavenly Fire Secret Silver actually produced an 8th grade spiritual fire. This should be the credit of the Divine Weapon Master. This 8th grade spiritual fire is very pure in nature. It's almost comparable to my purple flames. Jojo, are you happy? Arbor nodded her little head repeatedly. She was so happy that she almost wagged her little tail. Chapter 2301. With a wave of his hand, Emolien summoned Debeo again. The moment Debeo came out, he said as usual, "Ah, my beautiful and invincible little Emperor Master. Debeo missed you so much." Arbor turned her little head away. Emolien couldn't help but chuckle softly. He hugged her waist and lowered his head to whisper in her ear. "What's wrong, Jojo? Whenever you meet someone or something that gives you a headache, you have to change your habit of not talking. If you have nothing to do, bring Debeo with you and talk to you." His Jojo was very interesting. Every time she finished a series of words, she would put on an expression, as if the world was about to end. After that, no matter how others teased her, she would be too lazy to speak and look disinterested. Moreover, whenever she met something she didn't want to talk about, she would always put on a poker face, and be stubborn, and keep her mouth shut. That he always wanted to tease this little fellow. Arbor glared at him. In her heart she cursed. In the past, Debeo would only say, "Ah, my beautiful little master," when he came out. Now that he's improved, it feels like there are more words to describe her. Noisy. I used thunderstruck wood and heavenly fire secret silver to reforge Debeo's body. Now it's equivalent to an immortal bone body. The realm of a body cultivator can't be increased, but its actual ability should be beyond a 15th level body cultivator, and can fight against an 8th level spiritual master. Jojo, look. At Emolien's signal, Big Treasure turned around, and a serene blue flame flashed across his shiny black body. With a punch, he directly pulverized several huge rocks on the beach into fine powder, along with the blue flame. There was also a deep crater on the beach. Her Debeo had become powerful. Arbor's little mouth opened. She hurriedly shouted, Don't hit. But her beach was killed. She saw that the small crabs were beaten out of the pit. They were so scared that they ran around in panic. How pitiful. She had planned to fatten them up and cook them for dinner, that if they were killed now, what would they eat in the future? Emolien lowered her head and glanced at her little face. She hugged her and chuckled softly. Chocho is free. Let it go to the replenishing beach. Arbor rubbed his belly and blinked at Emolien. Hubby, Jojo is hungry. I want to eat porridge. Okay. How about I cook fish porridge for you? Emolien kissed her forehead with a grin, and with a flick of his sleeve, he released a black copper-colored golem. Jojo, this is number 1. Keep him by your side in the future. If there's anything dangerous, just let him do it. It doesn't matter if he dies. I still have 2 and 3 in my hands. I'll be able to use them after forging for a while. Xiaomu curiously glanced at that one. He was taller than Debao, and was not as smart and noisy as Debao. When you don't let him move, he will just stand there and do nothing. Perhaps this is a normal golem, Xiaomu thought. He didn't seem to be as durable as Debao, so his strength was probably average. This mechanical puppet is a level 15 Great Mystic Cultivator. Its level is too low. Emolien had her put it away and said with a grin, No need to feel heartache. Just let him go to those dangerous places. Arbor found it a bit strange. This mechanical puppet was Prince Mo's creation after all. Of course, she would feel heartache if it was damaged. He actually told her not to feel heartache. So strange. Moreover, didn't mechanical puppets only become body cultivators? How could they become level 15 Great Mystic Cultivators? Arbor scratched her little head. Chapter 2302. Meanwhile, Emolien glanced coldly at Golem 1, who was standing by the beach. She sneered inwardly. Luigi, when you died, you probably didn't expect that you would become my, Xiao's, puppet slave even after your death. If your mechanical body doesn't collapse or die in this lifetime, you will have to continue working for my Xiao to atone for your sins. This is your fate. Arbor naturally didn't know that Golem 1 was a mechanical puppet that Emolien had reconstructed using Luigi's blood and soul. After keeping the item in his inner world, Arbor removed the merging power of the feral ink and stored it in his own conscious. Then, she looked up at Emolien and rubbed against his chest. Fish porridge. I'll cook it now. Emolien smiled as he held her hand and asked, Do you want to eat corn? The little fellow nodded vigorously. Cute. Emolien held back his laughter and patted her head. Facing the sea, they listened to the calm rise and fall of the waves. After Qiao Mu ate 2 bowls of fish porridge and gnawed on a piece of corn, she rubbed her small, round belly before collapsing into Emolien's embrace, motionless. Sleep for a while before going out. The little fellow always had the habit of taking afternoon naps and dozing off after eating. Who knew who had spoiled her? Miss Qiao turned over and showed him the back of her head. After a full nap, Miss Qiao left Fish Orchid Planet with Prince Mo. The sky outside was already completely dark. Zhou Huan and the rest didn't disturb them and practiced talisman techniques in their rooms. Early the next morning, Miss Qiao let a handsome man out of her room and bumped into them in the corridor. Zhou Huan glanced at Emolien in astonishment. When she saw his icy gaze sweeping over her, she involuntarily shrunk her neck and asked, Eldest miss, when did the son-in-law come?" The people around Miss Qiao always appeared and disappeared mysteriously, just like that second uncle master, who seemed to have mysteriously disappeared, that this son-in-law came and left quickly. "My husband has always been by my side," Arbor said casually. He held Emolien's hand and walked downstairs. Zhou Huan opened her mouth, and Qihua hurriedly tugged at her sleeve. "Don't ask too much about the eldest Mrs. Matters. Since she's willing to tell us, let's just listen. Don't ask anything else." After all, Zhou Huan was the youngest. After being reminded by Qihua, she nodded clearly. They were all smart people. They had long realized how different the eldest young miss they followed was compared to others. Not to mention that the talisman creation books and spiritual techniques that she took out were all of the best quality. Take the ancient fire phoenix and the blue wand as an example. Were they things that ordinary people could possess? Eldest Miss had a lot of secrets. They had just started following Eldest Miss, so it was reasonable for Eldest Miss to hide things from them. After spending more time together, as long as they performed well in front of Eldest Miss, and made her feel that they were trustworthy people, she would definitely treat them differently. The two of them had eaten a sumptuous breakfast on Fish Orchid Planet. Naturally, they were not interested in a pot of millet porridge. Seeing Zhou Huan and the rest eating the millet porridge with white steamed buns with relish, Arbor took out a plate of minced meat and cornbread from his inner world and placed it in front of them. "Eat." Jojo hated eating white steamed buns the most. Vegetable buns or meat buns were what she liked, that she didn't like bean buns or sesame buns either. Chapter 2303. Stunned, Zhou Huan and the others quickly reached out to grab the mincemeat steamed buns. They were not stupid. With delicious mincemeat steamed buns, they naturally kept the white steamed buns in their inner worlds. Arbor silently glanced at them and made an evaluation in her heart. They were quite thrifty. At this moment, a group of people came in through the door. Qiaomu reflexively looked back, and her expression involuntarily froze. The group of people who came in through the door was led by a 15-year-old youth, wearing a brocade cloak. When he saw Arbor, his eyes suddenly lit up and he called out to her. "Jojo, why was the young master of the Zhu family in Wenka City here?" Arbor nodded at him. Patriarch Zhu quickly walked up and bowed with a smile. "Little godly doctor, what a coincidence. We met the little godly doctor as soon as we entered the city." Arbor looked at him helplessly. "Why are you here?" Zhu family head smiled and said, "It was Manor Head Gung who gave the order to transfer me here. The residence has not been settled yet, so we plan to stay at the inn for a few days." "So you'll be staying at the Shuntian Prefecture Lord residence from now on?" "Yes." "Then he would be promoted." Arbor replied with an, "Oh," and turned to look at young Master Zhu Su's complexion. "Your son's complexion is rosy and his breathing is steady. He should be almost cured. Take my prescription for another 10 days. Then he can stop taking the medicine." Patriarch Zhu was overjoyed and thanked Arbor repeatedly with cupped hands. The few of them chatted for a while. Then Zhu family's head took the young master upstairs. After Arbor and Emolien left the city, they found a secluded place and released all the teachers and students from the top academy. After a discussion, Wei Wei, Zhou Danjin, and the others planned to return to the academy and tell Dean Yunfei about the situation. Qi Xianxian and the others naturally made up their minds and ran away with Arbor. Zhou Danjin said a few words to the students, and then said, "If you want to go to the Divine Land, it will not be an easy thing. Jojo, why don't you come back to the academy with us? The dean should know more about this." "Yes," Wei Wei said with a straight face. "If you insist on going, I can provide you with a map. The main entrance of Shentian Prefecture to the Divine Land is on the hillside behind Mount Mang." Yes, it's near Gale Town." Zhou Danjin nodded and said, "Gale Town is a town that gradually became popular because of this main passage. Because it's the closest place to China, the town may sell some good things that we don't often see outside." Arbor was not very interested in shopping. He just nodded and said, "Can I go to Shenzhou at any time?" "Of course not," Wei Wei said in a muffled voice. "Why are you in such a hurry to go to the Divine Land? Although your cultivations are considered outstanding in the younger generation of the 6 prefectures, your cultivation is still very low. But if you go to the Divine Land, maybe you'll be nothing." That's right. You can continue to cultivate in the academy for another 10 years or so. It won't be too late to go to the Divine Land after that," Zhou Danjin also advised. "I've wanted to go to the Divine Land for a long time," Arbor said calmly. "Instructors, what do you think about the spirit chi of the 6 prefectures compared to the fish orchid planet?" Wei Wei was speechless. Zhou Danjin rubbed his chin and coughed lightly. Yes. If you go to the Divine Land, you can cultivate in the fish orchid planet for a while." Arbor nodded and said, "Xian and the others can continue to cultivate for a while." Chapter 2304. As for her, the Divine Land was so big that she needed to get to know it better. Besides, she wanted to see the expressions of the people who tried so hard to stop her from going to the Divine Land when they saw her. There's a transportation array in Mount Mang. You need to pay enough spirit stones to activate it. It can only transport one person at a time. The array is only activated on the 15th. If you go now, you'll have to wait for a few days. No need. Arbor reached out and grabbed a small boat. It said that there are no obstacles in the upper 3 prefectures, the middle 6 prefectures, and the lower star area. Red firmament wave. Wei Wei was shocked. But Zhou Danjin was calm. He had seen this ship before. He nodded with emotion. "All right. Instructor, you forgot that you have such a divine weapon. Then there's no problem. When you go to the Divine Land, you have to be careful. It's good that you change your temper." Arbor pursed his lips. After bidding farewell to the nagging instructors, Arbor took Qi Xian and the others back to Fish Orchid Planet and let them cultivate on their own. Then he returned to the inn, took Zhou Huan and the others, summoned the Blue Luan, and rushed to Mount Mang with Emolien and the others. "Are you afraid?" Arbor turned and asked the youths. Those people shook their heads in unison. It would be a lie to say that they were not afraid. With their cultivation and talisman power, they were going to follow Eldest Miss to the Divine Land. Wouldn't that make people panic? Would they be afraid? What was fear? Since they had made up their minds to follow Eldest Miss, they would not frown even if they had to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of fire. Xiaomu curled her lips slightly, and the moment she neared Mount Mang, she tossed out the crimson firmament blue wave ship. She watched as it transformed into a magnificent sight before her eyes. In the blink of an eye, it expanded in the wind and transformed into a giant 3-story ship. Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others stared so hard that their eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Before they could think about it, Arbor patted their backs. "Let's go." Zhou Huan and the others flew out involuntarily and landed on the ship. This ship was actually floating in the air, drifting with the wind. With Zhou Huan's young temperament, he immediately cried out in joy. He leaned against the mast and looked down at the blue sky, white clouds, and the small hill that had turned into a black dot. He could not help but laugh out loud. "Amazing! Is this ship a flying spirit artifact? Spirit weapon? After all, this was a saint artifact." Arbor glanced at the youth speechlessly. He walked to Emolien's side and held her hand. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they turned their heads to look at the vast mountains. "Let's go," Arbor asked. Emolien nodded. "Okay, there's no time like the present. Let's go." No matter where Jojo goes, I will follow. Emolian reached out and hugged her waist. She pointed to the front and said, "Give the order." Arbor buried his head in his chest and rubbed it. With a thought, the whole ship started to move and flew towards the depths of the Mang Mountains. At this time, some merchants who were doing business in Gale Town, squatting at the door of the inn and waiting for the 15th passage to open, the practitioners looked up at the sky in surprise. In the originally quiet depths of the mountains, there was a loud rumbling sound. What? Is this the transmission array? Impossible. It's not the 15th passage. How can the transmission array react? While everyone was whispering, a layer of light shrouded the sky. Chapter 2305. The passage to the Divine Land was really opened by force. Everyone jumped up in surprise and looked at the sky. There, divine power lingered, and layers of light golden light overflowed, as if clusters of dazzling fireworks were lit in the sky at this time. In the vast light golden halo, the marvelous scenery of the upper three provinces appeared. The 99-story beast ceiling tower of the Divine Land towered into the clouds. The vast snow of the Tsangzhou Prefecture. At the ferry of the Forgetfulness River in the Underworld Prefecture, the mournful blood-colored flowers were in full bloom. The mist-like layers of golden light shrouded the ice and snow and gradually disappeared. The marvelous scenery of the immortal mountains with overlapping peaks also faintly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. This scene was unforgettable for a long time. In a trance, they seemed to see a ship enter the misty immortal mountains, and in the end, it didn't leave any trace. Everyone in Gale Town was in an uproar. For a long time, the rumor that a giant ship had flown to the sky was still circulating in the town. Spring filled the building. Young Master Song Feng sat quietly in a small attic, his fingers flicking back and forth a small jade wine cup. After a slight noise on the stairs, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, 7 men of different beauty, each with their own style, seductively gathered in the small attic. Young Master Song Feng was silent for a long time before he asked, "Fan Meng and Fan, you haven't come yet?" "They're here. Young Master. I've already packed my bags and was waiting to go on the road." The seductive man in red leaned against a pillar and winked at young Master Song Feng coquettishly. Young Master Song Feng was expressionless, and his eyes fell on Fan Meng and Fan Yu, who were slowly walking forward. "Since everyone is here, let's go. Remember to burn everything." On the 7th day of February, a big fire burned the spring-filled building to the ground. The fire was so big that it spread to the apricot house across the street and burned half of the apricot house. The procuress was so angry that she stood in front of the apricot house every day for 18 days, pointing at the spring-filled building across the street and cursing. "A bunch of sluts. It's better if they all rot in that building and never come out to harm people again." Top College of the Lava Mountains. After listening to Wei Wei, Zhou Danjin, and the others, Yun Fiang was silent for a long time. Then he nodded and said, "Although it's still early, the children of our academy are a group of hot-blooded youths. It's not impossible to suddenly go to the Divine Land. Dean Yu, since the children have made up their minds, we will support them." Yun Fiang clenched his fists tightly and looked at the few instructors in front of him with a serious expression. "Are you ready?" "Huh?" Everyone shifted their gaze to the vice dean of the Buddhist faculty. "Brother, do you know what the dean is talking about? The top academies are setting off for Shenzhou. We will move the entire academy to Shenzhou and become a strong backing for the children." Everyone! Exclamation point. "I am Mr. Dean, how can you be so sure?" Would the mentors who had not broken through the divine realm still have an advantage when they went to the Divine Land? The sobbing Zhou Danjin and the rest returned to their respective courtyards to pack their luggage. "Dean, is it really okay to be in such a hurry?" After the teachers left, Master Wu Yin came out from the inner hall and sighed. "Other than the ghost grass, we haven't found anything in all these years. We can only go to the 3 prefectures to find the remaining materials." The plain-clothed man turned around and looked at Master Wu Yin with a determined gaze. "I believe that we will succeed." The two opened the door to the secret room and walked into an inner room filled with ice cubes. They looked at a serene ice sculpture in the distance. Chapter 2306. Divine Land, Dragon Flame City. Madame Goen's estate. Her slender, snow-white index finger lifted the chin of a beautiful man, and the red, soft and fragrant silk covering her body slid down from her milk-like skin to the ground, revealing her exquisite, snow-white, and graceful figure. Within the fluttering muslin curtain, sounds that made one blush and one's heart palpitate quickly rang out. The two young servant girls accompanying her blushed as they hurriedly retreated, closing the door behind them. Madame was nearly 50 years old, but her figure was even more enchanting. She was a bride every day, indulging in pleasure every night until dawn, and being nourished by all kinds of handsome men until she was rather moist and beautiful. She was truly envious to death. That concubine-born fifth young master of the Qin estate was truly good-looking. It was just that his body was a bit frail. She hoped that Madame would properly dote on him and not overdo it. It would be too much of a pity if she killed him. The two young servant girls hid behind the door and peeked for a while longer. Only then did they plan to retreat, their small faces as red as blood. Just as they turned around, one of the servant girls let out a yelp and unexpectedly bumped into a robust and broad chest. The newcomer's inner garment was boldly unbuttoned, revealing a handsome chest. A careless, teasing smile hung on his handsome face as he casually hugged the servant girl's waist. "Big sister Kaihui, your face is so red. TSK, you must be thinking of a man." Ah. Her body, which had long been aroused, fell limply into the man's embrace. Her face was so red that it seemed like blood was about to drip out. "Since that's the case, then let this Wei properly dote on big sister Kaihui." "Ah, young Master Wei, don't be like this, young Master Wei." That servant girl called out tenderly. She was half pushed and half hugged by the man. She buried her face in the man's embrace, allowing him to carry her away in large strides. "TSK." The other servant girl glared at the two's departing figures with jealousy and hatred. She cursed, "Shameless little hussy. Madame treated people too leniently. She allowed this little slut to so brazenly seduce the young master in front of Madame's bedroom. Last time, she had mentioned to Madame that she couldn't indulge that little hussy Kaihui like this anymore. Madame, however, waved her hand indifferently and said that there was no need to care. Now that Madame had obtained the fifth young Sir Qin, that she yearned for so much perhaps, she would be even less concerned about the other young sirs. Damn it! The current Madame of the State Security wasn't living happily with fifth young Master Qin, under a red lawn tent like the young maidservant had imagined. That moaning and moaning just now was completely her own entertainment. No one else had touched her at all. She glared angrily at the man on the bed, who had been stripped naked and drugged with several types of aphrodisiac. At this moment, his head was covered in cold sweat, and his body was trembling nonstop. But he was still limp and motionless. The men of the Qin family were all tall and slender with exquisite features. Omega Kotoku and eldest young Master Qin were the most outstanding. However, those two people were not easy to deal with. This fifth Qin appeared to have a delicate temperament, but who knew that he was actually very unyielding. Damn it. The meat was already in her mouth, but she couldn't eat it. This made Madame's heart itch even more unbearably. A trace of resentment slid across Madame of the State Security's indescribably beautiful face. She reached out to stroke the man's face with extreme gentleness, as she exhaled a light pink fragrant mist. "Fifth young sir, do you know that your appearance right now when you would rather die than submit is especially lovable? Unfortunately, no matter how resolute and unyielding a man, who has fallen into my State Security's hands." Chapter 2307. In the end, you'll still lead a befuddled life under my bewildering fragrance. A pink fragrant mist curled around the man's face. In the haze, the fifth young master's skin was increasingly fair, and his features were picturesque. His jade-like forehead was covered in layers of cold sweat, and he bit down on his tightly pursed lips, leaving a faint trace of blood. "Darling." Madame Guo's heart simply itched to the extreme as she looked at the man in front of her. She stroked him up and down with all her might with her red-painted fingers, and her red lips pressed against his, continuously exhaling a fragrant mist. "Damn it! He was actually still clear-headed even after being hit by such a deep bewildering fragrance and adding several types of aphrodisiac incense. It seemed like this man wasn't as frail as he appeared to be. His willpower was truly firm. This was like catching a rabbit right in front of your eyes, yet there was a thick defensive barrier between you, so you couldn't eat it no matter how hard you tried. Madame Guo was both anxious and angry. Her delicate body pressed against the fifth young master's, and she exhaled a fragrant breath next to his ear. Darling, darling, just open your eyes and look at me. On the bed, fifth Qin, who was drenched in cold sweat, abruptly opened his eyes. That pair of chilly eyes didn't contain any trace of emotion, as if they were 10,000 miles of frosty frost beneath the ice as he stared fixedly at her. Madame Guo's face flushed red, yet she was also quite angry. This pair of beautiful eyes looked at her, as if he was looking at a piece of filthy mud, making her feel so ashamed that she couldn't show her face. Her soft snake-like delicate body covered his body, moving inch by inch, and she said in exasperation, "Darling, do you know who betrayed you and sent you into my estate? It's that seventh younger brother of yours, Takik. Did you think you could still escape unscathed after entering my countries and estate?" Madame Guo caressed the man's ice-cold face, leaving a red lipstick mark on his cheek. "My darling, why must you harm yourself like this? Hurry up and come over, okay?" Truly disgusting. The man's chilly voice was just like his eyes, merciless and grave. Slap. Madame Guo flew into a rage out of humiliation, and she heavily slapped the fifth young master's handsome face. This man was so despicable. Madame of the National Security Agency swept the pair of golden wind glazed cups on the table to the ground in a frenzy. Clang! The precious glass cup was smashed into pieces. Coincidentally, there was a knock on the door, which made the impatient Madame of the National Security Agency angry and angry. She picked up a piece of silk and wrapped it around her body. She opened the door and slapped the person's face. "You're looking for trouble. Can't you see that I'm busy, madam?" The steward was so scared that he knelt on the ground and crawled in front of the beautiful woman's white toes. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Madam, please forgive me. Madam, please forgive me. This lowly one didn't dare to come and disturb you. It's just that outside the door, the eldest young master of the Qin estate brought people to fight their way in." Madame Goen's face contorted as she stomped on the steward's head. "Idiot! Don't you know how to block? Block? What do you want to use to block this young master's path?" A cheerful voice fell into Madame Goen's ears. When she raised her eyes, she just happened to see a handsome young master in a white robe gracefully walking to her side. He very flirtatiously used a small gold fan to prop up her blushing face, and he clicked his tongue and said, "Madame Goen, you're truly beautiful to the point of making one's heart beat." The silk cloak on Madame Goen's body covered the important parts, leaving a large portion of her fragrant shoulder exposed to the air. Chapter 2308. A man with weak self-control would definitely have a nosebleed at this moment. Yet eldest young Sir Qin could still tease her without a change in expression. Instead, it was Madame Guo who groaned at his teasing. She swayed her slender waist and wanted to stick close to eldest young Sir Qin, but he blocked her face with a wave of his small golden fan. "Madam, I am here today on my father's orders to bring fifth brother back to the estate." Family head Qin also knew about this. Madame Guo's face contorted again, and she hastily smiled obsequiously and coquettishly as she said, "Eldest young sir, you really like to joke. Why would your family's honorable fifth young sir be in the Guo's estate?" She refused to admit it. Eldest young sir's handsome brows knitted slightly, but his expression was very calm. If this bitch refused to admit it, with her status as a second-ranked titled noble lady, he indeed couldn't force his way in with his men. But this matter wasn't over yet. "In that case, my fifth brother really isn't here with madam?" Eldest young Sir Qin didn't get angry and smiled mildly. "That's right. How would the Guo's estate dare to kidnap someone from the Qin estate? Don't you think so, eldest young sir?" Before Madame Guo's hand could land on Qin Xian's shoulder, her hand was slapped away by the latter's fan. "Ah!" Madame Guo clutched her reddened hand and glared angrily at the handsome and elegant man standing before her with a charming smile. He really hit her hard. This hateful man didn't know how to treat a woman with tenderness at all. Since Madam has made it clear that my fifth brother isn't in your estate, then this young sir will take his leave. Eldest young sir bowed with a grin and turned to leave. He suddenly turned his head and smiled at her with pursed lips. Oh, that's right. Madam, on the way here, I seem to have seen people from the Eastern Palace ferociously heading toward your estate with 2 lumps of mangled flesh. They looked so scary. Eldest young sir flicked his sleeve to cover his mouth and revealed a frightened expression. He blinked and smiled gracefully at the stupefied Madame Gua before leading a group of servants away, leaving behind a slender jade-like back view. This damned evildoer, his lightly pursed lips and bewitching appearance was truly too moving. Madame Goen looked at the young master's back as he left. Her eyes were fixed on him. She felt her mouth dry and her heart rippled. Unfortunately, she couldn't eat him. She hated it so much that her teeth itched. It's fine, it's fine. In any case, I've left the fifth young master behind. Even if I can't go up for the time being, I still have to get my hands back. Madame Gua's entire body was seething with anger. She returned to her room in a huff, and her eyes immediately widened. She only saw that there was no one in her boudoir. There was no sign of the young master in the red silk canopy. Her lover, her young and handsome lover, actually ran away in just a few minutes? Madame Goen could not vent her anger. She was so angry that she gritted her teeth and smashed everything in the house, screaming madly in the house with disheveled hair. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, his gaze fell on the broken pieces of porcelain next to the bed. He couldn't help but be startled. Why was the golden phoenix glazed cup bestowed by His Majesty broken? When she turned her head and saw a servant girl timidly walk in, Madame Goen immediately slapped her. Why is my glazed cup broken? The servant girl inexplicably suffered an unexpected calamity. She hurriedly knelt down in panic and said, Madam, this servant doesn't know. Just now, Madam was the only one smashing things in the room. Without asking, this glazed cup must have been broken by Madam. But now. Chapter 2309. The maidservant's eyes widened as she lay on the ground, trembling all over. What's the use of keeping you if you don't know anything? Madame Goen shouted angrily. Madam, please spare me, Madam. Madame Goen wanted to push the blame to a mere maidservant. How could she bear the crime of despising the Emperor's grace? Destroying something bestowed by His Majesty was a crime punishable by death. She was just a mere maidservant, and Madame Goen was going to push her out to be a scapegoat. Bitch! How dare you break the glass cup bestowed by His Majesty? Go to hell! Madame Goen kicked the maidservant's face, sending her flying and vomiting blood. She fell heavily on the ground outside the door and could not get up again. Madam! Third young Master Fu from the Eastern Palace sent 2 bloody maidservants over. The steward trembled as he led a few people to the door of Madame Goen's bedroom and knelt on the ground with a thud. He felt that he was so unlucky. The other shrewd stewards in the residence had all fled when they heard the news, and he was the only one who was involved in such a thing. He would definitely not end well. However, someone had just thrown these 2 balls of blood at their door and left. As a steward, he could not just leave these 2 balls of blood lying in front of his door like this. Madame Goen's eyes widened when her gaze fell on the 2 balls of blood and flesh. No one could tell that these 2 balls of blood were 2 beautiful maidservants. These were the women she had sent to the Crown Prince's residence. The Crown Prince had not returned to the palace yet, and the people from the Eastern Palace dared to torture the maidservants she had sent. Damn it, everyone dares to defy me. Third young Master Fu also passed down a decree from His Highness, the Crown Prince, to all the officials in the various residences to bring back the young ladies within 3 days. If they are late, they will be killed every day. The third young master even posted a notice on the mission board in the big square in the city. Everyone has seen the notice, and everyone is talking about it enthusiastically right now. Crown Prince, you are so willful. You haven't returned yet, but you have already made a name for yourself in Dragonflame City. Your ruthlessness and viciousness have undoubtedly captured a large number of your subjects' fans. Right now, everyone was saying that the son resembled his father. As expected of the great emperor's biological son, Madame Guo's eyes were wide open. She was so angry that she wanted to tremble. What? That wretched crown prince Lian actually dared to disregard his aunt's face like this. He actually dared to be so resolute. It was obvious that he wanted to put her face in the mud and step on it. Why did everyone have to go against her? How hateful. Madame Goen picked up the vase next to the door and smashed it on the manager's head. Sob, sob, sob. I knew I was going to be unlucky. The steward exclaimed, I'm so unlucky, and fainted on the ground. Gather the guards and follow me into the palace immediately. Madame Goen was so angry that her heart and liver were trembling. She couldn't wait to immediately rush into the palace and cut that damned Fu Sanqian into pieces. A mere hanger-on of the crown prince actually dared to trample on the face of the madam of the Ministry of National Security. I heard that third young Master Fu is a handsome gentleman. A pale-faced old eunuch wretchedly followed Madame Goen's footsteps and slandered. It doesn't matter if that fifth young Master Qin runs away. Madame can capture this third Fu back to warm your bed. Good idea. Madame Goen aggressively led people to the Eastern Palace. Chapter 2310. On the other side, fifth young Sir Qin, who had been carried out of the state security estate by 2 shadow guards, was only wrapped in a thin white robe as he tightly covered himself. Upon exiting the state security estate, fifth young Sir got off the ground and walked on his own. Unexpectedly, his body was very soft, and he stumbled and fell to the ground. His personal pageboy Ling Ge supported fifth young Sir's arm and cried out in a sobbing tone, Why, young Sir, how are you? Help me back. Fifth young Sir gripped Ling Ji's hand tightly. Ling Ge could sense that her young Sir was continuously trembling in fear from the depths of his body to his soul. Upon returning to the Qin estate, fifth Qin shut himself in his room and changed the water 17 to 18 times within 2 hours. It wasn't until eldest young Sir arrived at his room that Ling Ge rolled to eldest young Sir's feet while bawling, eldest young Sir, please save my family's fifth young Sir. Qin Xian kicked open the door and saw his fifth brother, whose skin was flushed red from soaking in the bathtub, and was about to rot. He angrily pulled him out of the water. Useless thing. Eldest young Sir slapped this younger brother in exasperation for failing to live up to his expectations. He grabbed his clean white bathrobe and said angrily, I didn't spend so much effort to save you to see you rot in the bathtub. Do you hate? Are you angry? Are you unwilling? Then pull yourself together. With your brain. How could you not find a way to kill that bitch? Be big brother dirty. So dirty. Wash it off, wash it clean. Fifth young Sir stumbled and threw himself onto eldest young Sir's shoulder, holding his arm as his entire body trembled nonstop. Qin Xian sighed and reached out to hold his shoulder, crying bitterly with him. He was also extremely furious. His elegant and refined fifth brother, who usually only knew how to play the zither, had never suffered such humiliation. He definitely had to get payback from that bitch for this debt. You've been poisoned by several types of perfume. Do you want eldest brother to find you a few clean immature antidotes? No, don't. Fifth young Sir pushed his eldest brother away and retreated several steps in horror. He covered his mouth with one hand and let out waves of retching. Women were so disgusting, so disgusting. He didn't want them to touch a single strand of his hair. Qin Xian was very helpless. He nodded and said, Then I'll ask Dr. Chang to come over and help you. It's just that if this kind of powder is not dissolved, it will eventually affect your body. Big brother doesn't want you to continue suffering. Fifth young Master Qin supported himself with one hand by the side of the bathtub, his eyes fixed on the clear water surface. Dirty, so dirty. Dirty. Qin Xian sighed and patted his fifth brother's shoulder. He walked out and called for Ling Ge. Take good care of young master during this period of time. Remove all the servant girls from the court. Yes. Eastern Palace. At the main entrance, there was a table carved from a golden elm. Third young Master Fu was there with 2 rows of guards. He was holding a book and a pen in his hand. Whenever a lord took a girl away, he would cross off a name. Young master. Official Yu's housekeeper is here to fetch second Miss Yu. A vicious look flashed across third young Master Fu's lazy eyebrows. Didn't you see what the notice says? Let their fathers come and collect them. Fuck. The head of the U residence's steward was about to explode. Why must an adult be the one to bring his daughter home? The crown prince was willful, and everyone in the crown prince's estate wasn't a good person. Whoa. He wanted to go home and find daddy. Meanwhile, Madame Goen, who was blocked at the palace entrance, glared with green eyes. Her finger trembled as she pointed at the gatekeeper. Say that again. Do you know who I am? How dare you block this madam? Emolien. This madam in you power. No. 2. Stand. End of this volume. Chapter 23:11. The moment the crimson firmament waves passed through the passage, they felt as if they had passed through a thin film of water. The rich spiritual energy that greeted them made them feel refreshed. Looking up, it was as if they were surrounded by a sea of stars. They were wandering in such a boundless sea of stars. Even the crimson firmament waves were like a grain of sand in the sea of stars, as small as a speck of dust. Such a vast sea of stars made everyone feel a little intoxicated. At this moment, it was as if they had melted into a speck of dust in the air, floating along with the vast sea of stars. Don't be intoxicated. A cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Zhou Huan and the others, who had weak willpower, woke up in an instant. Turning their heads, they saw the crown prince's tall figure standing under the starry night sky. His expression was cold as he looked up at the starry sky, light flashing in his eyes. What are you waiting for? The spiritual energy here is rich. This is a rare opportunity. Sit down and guide the spiritual energy into your body. The crown prince turned to look at them and frowned. Ah yes, Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others quickly sat down cross-legged and focused on guiding the spiritual energy into their bodies, quietly cultivating. Arbor sat on the empty deck at the front of the ship. At this moment, she had already entered a mysterious state. What she saw was herself walking barefoot in the vast Milky Way, kicking the sparkling water of the Milky Way under her feet. As she walked, there was not a trace of wind, nor was there a single cloud. So fast. Her speed was getting faster and faster. She looked like she was walking, but in fact, she was flashing like light at a speed that was hard to distinguish with the naked eye. Emolien, who was leaning against the railing and watching Jojo cultivate, was suddenly stunned. A hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. Oh my God, his little wife was going to ascend to the heavens. What lingered around his wife was not the five-colored spiritual energy, but that star fragments that looked like specks of dust surrounded her body. This was clearly holy power, the strongest power in the world, also known as the star field power or star power. The little guy who had not broken through to the great spiritual master level had actually sensed the purest holy power in the world. Looking at the Saint Force, they were scrambling to enter the little one's body, but they were blocked by a stream of light. Emolien then set his mind at ease. He already knew that this little thing's body was very strange. It was as if there was a powerful protective force hidden in her small body. Anything that would harm her body would be inadvertently blocked by this force. Although the saint energy was good, the little thing's current body would definitely not be able to accept it. Even if he forcefully absorbed it, he wouldn't be able to absorb it. To her, the saint energy was no longer a supplement. Instead, it was harmful to her body. She was someone who had not even reached the divine state yet. You want her to accept the saint energy beyond her level? Aren't you just looking for trouble? The pitiful spiritual energy was blocked by the turbulent and overbearing saint energy, and it could not even get close to Xiqiao's body. Emolien was instantly at a loss for words. With a flick of his sleeve, he released the holy fire to absorb the surrounding saint energy. This allowed the surging spiritual energy to pass through the layers of obstacles and rush towards their little master's Dantian star field without any hindrance. A ball of extremely strong light was absorbed by the Dantian star field along with the spiritual energy from all directions. Whoosh whoosh. Another 2 balls were absorbed into the Dantian star field. Arbor opened his eyes in confusion. Chapter 23:12. Wasn't this her Dantian star field? Just like the starry sky in front of her, Her Danteon star field was also vast and boundless. A fist-sized star was hanging high in the center of the star field. This star, which was supposed to be the most dazzling, was still in a deep sleep. It was surrounded by 4 stars of almost the same size but different colors. Only the bluefish orchid star was lit up. In addition, there was a small Chu-Yun star floating in the distance. It was close to a colorful paradise star. However, at this time, she could clearly see that 3 white nameless stars were absorbed into this star field. They were floating in the upper left corner of Chu-Yun's star. 3 nameless stars? Arbor was moved. His spiritual awareness captured the small spiritual awareness body and let her go in for a stroll. The spiritual awareness body ran around the 3 spacious nameless stars in a very funny way. It ran until it was out of breath before it stopped. No, it was paralyzed. It was paralyzed on one of the nameless stars. It was so lazy that Arbor couldn't bear to look at it. This thing definitely couldn't be her spiritual awareness body. Could it be that these 3 nameless stars were absorbed from the starry sky by the Danteon star field? The spirit domain secret realm? This was too. Bandit. However, Jojo was very satisfied. With 3 more star fields, no matter what she used them for in the future, they were still her star fields. Even if she used them to feed Paradise Star in the future, it would still be good. The star chart in front of her was faintly blurred. Arbor knew that she was going to leave this special state of enlightenment. When she opened her eyes, it was as if 2 vortexes of broken stars appeared in her eyes. They were so deep that it seemed like they were going to absorb everything in the world. Only when the spiritual power around her body dissipated did she completely walk out of the state of enlightenment. She had entered the state of enlightenment for no reason, and had also advanced by a level for no reason. She had also received 3 nameless stars for no reason. Arbor thought that this trip to the red firmament blue waves was really quite reliable. An 8th rank spirit master. Miss Chiao lowered her head and looked at her small hand. The spirit energy on her palm had yet to completely disperse. There was a faint layer of strange energy attached to it. This spiritual energy seemed to be very strong. Mo Lien had already arrived in front of her with a flutter. Without saying a word, he reached out and hugged her. Holding her little hand, he looked it up and down, left and right. Clicking his tongue in wonder, he said, "Little guy, you've absorbed a little star power into your spiritual power." This little rank 8 spiritual master in front of him could probably kill 2 rank 12 great spiritual masters with a single wave of spiritual pressure. That was the strongest force in the star field. It carried out the laws of heaven and earth, and the weak couldn't win against the strong. Mo Lien expressed that the little guy might be able to kill a level 15 great spiritual master with 1 punch. Xiao Mu gazed at him blankly before hugging his arm and shouting, Lien, let me tell you something. My spiritual sense actually didn't increase. This really shouldn't have happened. Her spiritual sense was different from other people's. Every time she advanced, which one wasn't accompanied by the rhythm of her spiritual sense skyrocketing. It was very strange that it didn't increase this time. It's nothing. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to cover his face. He secretly said in his heart, "Wife, it doesn't matter whether your spiritual sense increased or not. You're already able to integrate a trace of sacred power into your spiritual realm cultivation. Your husband is really speechless." Arbor reached out and clenched her fist. She lowered her head listlessly. Forget it. Whether it increased or not can't be forced. Ah, look. There seems to be an exit in front. This chapter is a gift. Chapter 23:13. Arbor looked up and saw a light array appearing in the middle of the pitch-black sea of stars. Everything in the world seemed to be sucked into this light array, as a strong suction force pressed down on them. The crimson firmament wave was sucked in involuntarily. However, although the force was strong, it could not break through the crimson firmament wave's defense. Therefore, the people on the ship felt fine. As the crimson firmament wave was sucked out by the light array at the exit, there was a moment of darkness in front of everyone's eyes. Then they saw a glaring light shoot in. The entire ship seemed to have bounced off a soft and moist cover and rushed out of the light formation in an instant. The silence suddenly turned into a cacophony of noises. Shouts, shouts, and clamors could be heard incessantly. Wow! I saw a huge 3-storied ship flying in the sky. Quick, quick, pinch me. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Damn, brother, speak properly. You're spitting on my face. What are you so excited about? I've been in the world for 30 years. When I went to the 17th floor of the Beast Ceiling Pagoda, I even saw pigs flying in the sky. You're awesome, aren't you? You're just a little level 7 spiritual master. And you want to go to the 17th floor of the Beast Ceiling Pagoda? You're already panting when you go up to the 5th floor. You're bullshitting. Arbor curiously leaned on the ship's railing and blinked his big eyes as he looked at the crowd below. It was a very bustling town. There were many shops and taverns on both sides of the road. A spacious road was occupied by many stalls. Everyone was squeezed in a narrow path and looked up at their crimson firmament wave ship. It was a hubbub of voices and abnormally noisy. Looking at their clothes, they were all ordinary cultivators. However, there was a clear difference between them and the cultivators from the 6 prefectures' lower star regions. Although their clothes were ordinary, they were very neat and tidy. Their complexions were rosy, and they were talking cheerfully. They looked carefree. Could it be that those rotten zombies haven't appeared on the divine land yet? Look at this group of Shenzhou people. They seem to be living quite comfortably. Arbor retracted his head from the railing and almost fell into Emolien's arms when he turned around. She didn't know when this fellow had quietly walked up behind her, without making a single sound. Arbor glared at him angrily and poked his chin. What should we do, Rin? Put the boat away. This boat was indeed big and ostentatious. It was impossible not to attract attention. Jojo was a very low-key young lady. She was not suitable to be so ostentatious. Therefore, the couple decided that it was better not to attract hatred. It would be better to keep the ship as soon as possible and switch to Qinghuan. Arbor nodded and told Zhou Huan and the others to prepare to float. Several people jumped out of the Scarlet Firmament Wave ship at the same time. Arbor used his spiritual sense to drag the giant ship into the Fish Orchid planet with the help of the small tree. The few of them jumped and landed on Qinghuan's back. Qinghuan flapped its wings lightly and quickly left the crowded entrance of the small town. The group of people below, who were chasing after them, lost track of Arbor, and the others after a few steps. Hey, where did they go? Are those people you're talking about from the middle 6 prefectures? Are you kidding? How is that possible? How can such a divine artifact appear in the small 6 prefectures? Chapter 23:14. A barren place like the middle 6 prefectures can't possibly have such an extraordinary artifact. I'm guessing that it's probably a young master or young mistress from one of the divine prefecture's aristocratic families who came back from their travels. And that big green bird just now, did you see it clearly? That aura it released doesn't feel like an ordinary spirit beast. How can people from the middle 6 prefectures become so powerful? How is that possible? While the entire town was discussing animatedly, they didn't know that Xiao Mu and Emolien had openly returned to the crowd with Zhou Huan and the other 7. They had just disappeared in front of people at the fastest speed, and no one could catch a trace of them. In this border town that connected the middle 6 prefectures and the divine prefecture, there didn't seem to be many experts. Some of them were ordinary businessmen, and some of them were spirit masters, who didn't have particularly high cultivation levels. Miss Chiao didn't like to listen to these people's noisy discussions. They were nothing more than praising the people of the divine prefecture and belittling the middle 6 prefectures. But if these people knew that Miss Chiao didn't come from the middle 6 prefectures, but from the lower star region, wouldn't they all come to watch as if someone from another star region had invaded? A group of people who were ridiculously arrogant. Arbor was led by Emolien to a stable in the northernmost part of town. These weren't ordinary horses. These horses were mostly level 8 or level 9 mystical beasts. Their running speed naturally couldn't be compared to ordinary horses. Their flying beasts were too eye-catching. If they really let them out, it would be like what happened just now, which was very troublesome. The young couple wasn't interested. They were surrounded and watched as if they were divine beasts. How much is it? And level 8 spirit horse for 1 spirit stone. That person stretched out a finger and waved it in front of Emolien and Arbor. How about hiring a driver? That depends on where you're going. Dragon Flame City. Dragon Flame City is thousands of miles away from this border town. Even my strongest and most vigorous spirit horse would need at least 10 days to half a month to travel. Emolien looked at him expressionlessly. Name your price. The horse seller immediately became spirited and grinned. Young master, you don't know. If I were to hire a coachman for you. 9 horses and a coachman. A coachman and a more comfortable carriage for you. The journey to Dragon Flame City will cost at least 15 spirit stones. 9 horses will cost 9 spirit stones. How about this? I'll give you a discount. How about 20 spirit stones? Emolien nodded. She didn't even try to bargain with him. Instead, she reached into her inner world and took out a money pouch. Then, she poured out 20 spirit stones and gave them to the young man. The little brother smiled so widely that his teeth could not be seen. He reached out his claws to touch the few spirit stones and put them all into his pocket. His attitude towards them was clearly more respectful. Young masters and young misses, please wait a moment. This lowly one will go and prepare now. Oh my, I really couldn't tell that this handsome young master was really a generous grandpa of the god of wealth. Judging from his appearance, he was just a pretty boy. Brother Horse Seller secretly complained. Unexpectedly, he took out 20 genuine spirit stones without hesitation. He really looked at him in a new light. One had to know that this was Brother Horse Seller's first big business deal since winter. It even benefited that coachman Chen, who hadn't had much business for a few days. Chapter 23:15. Brother Seller held the 3 spirit stones in his hand and walked towards carriage driver Chen's dilapidated courtyard with a smile. Giving him 3 spirit stones should be enough. If he had not taken on this big order, carriage driver Chen would still be at home like a corpse. Therefore, it was normal to take a portion of the commission. Move aside, move aside, move aside. All of you move aside. Rough roars, accompanied by all sorts of curses and complaints along the way, filled this area. A group of aggressive burly men appeared in front of everyone's eyes and were chasing after a young girl who was running in a panic. That scene was not very beautiful. Originally, more than half of this street was occupied by 2 stalls. Now that they had bumped into the scene of burly men catching a young girl, this made the street even more crowded and difficult to walk on. That young girl cried until her eyes were swollen like walnuts, and the corners of her eyes were bloodshot. As she cried mournfully, she hurriedly turned back to take a look. However, when she saw the burly men closing in on her, her eyes were dyed with a trace of fear, and she ran forward wildly. Outside the crowd, that white figure was especially eye-catching. He stood in front of that dilapidated stable. Even though the background was very old and dirty, he looked especially elegant and noble. Arbor had already seen the group of people running over. The little fellow reflexively pulled Emolien back by 2 large steps, opening up a path for him. Unfortunately, that young girl who seemed to have an extremely miserable life was still rushing towards them. To be precise, she pounced on Emolien. Arbor. Almost as if it was a conditioned reflex, Miss Chiao flew up and kicked heavily on that young girl's chest. She directly sent her flying with a kick. Everyone's jaws dropped at the same time, including Zhou Huan and the other 8 people standing behind the 2 of them. Their shocked expressions were especially hilarious. What was going on? Everyone looked speechlessly at the young girl, who bravely kicked that young girl away. With one look, they were immediately stunned. Previously, this little girl had been standing beside the white-clothed man. Her body was wrapped in a thick fur cloak, and her small head was hidden under a hat. At this moment she swiftly moved. After a kick, the velvet hat on her head slid down to her shoulders, revealing a small, delicate, expressionless face. Puffed. Emolien held her forehead and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Look, his bao was so unpredictable. Look at that, he shocked everyone. Which family had such a fierce young lady? When she saw someone pouncing on her husband, she immediately kicked him away. Poor unfortunate young lady. After being sent flying by Miss Chiao's kick, her delicate and weak body fell heavily to the ground, unable to recover for a long time. Isn't that so? Who would have thought that he, who had such a hard life, would actually meet someone who didn't talk nonsense with him? Everyone looked at the fierce little girl in front of them with different expressions. He felt that the little girl was not in a good mood. People with strong survival instincts had already shut their mouths and retreated to the side, quietly watching the show. But there were always self-proclaimed righteous people who stepped forward to shout with righteous indignation. At this moment, a scholarly man walked out and angrily questioned Arbor. "What's wrong with you, young lady? Why did you kick someone for no reason?" "She doesn't know how to walk." Arbor frowned. Chapter 23:16. She doesn't even have eyes, pouncing straight at her husband. "If I don't beat her up, who should I beat up?" Jojo's motto was to beat anyone who dared to pounce on her husband. You don't follow the rules at all." Everyone's jaws dropped again, and the corners of their mouths couldn't help but twitch. Where the hell did this little guy jump out from? Shouldn't such a delicate and soft little girl be very kind? Even if she met those old grandpas and grannies who couldn't walk, she couldn't help but reach out to help them. What's more, a girl who seemed to have such a tragic background ran over to them to ask for help. If it was an ordinary aristocratic family's daughter, shouldn't she ask her husband to save her in order to show her magnanimity and take her in as a personal maidservant while she was at it? If Arbor knew what these people were thinking, he would definitely ruthlessly mock them. Crazy. If you're overflowing with sympathy, then go save her. Go be that sunflower and illuminate the common people. This baby doesn't want her husband to save other women. She never thought of herself as a good person. So naturally, she didn't have this kind of pure and holy character. She was a bad silver. Good people don't live long, bad silver world. She'll just be a bad silver. Ta-ta-ta. The little fellow walked a few steps forward, frowning as she looked at that purple lump on the ground. She stretched out her hand and pointed. "Take it away. A good dog doesn't block the way. Just leave it here. They still have a lot of horses to bring out later." The righteous scholar was simply about to faint from anger. His finger trembled as he pointed at Miss Chiao, angrily saying, You're a girl. How can you be so unsympathetic? Didn't you see that this girl was completely unable to get up after being kicked by you? You're so devoid of conscience and inhumane. I really don't know which family's lord taught you to be such a top quality. This young master spoils her. Why? Do you have a problem with it?" Emolien stared at that righteous scholar and said with a mocking smile, "Since you have such a sense of justice, why don't you bring this pitiful girl back and raise her well?" The little fellow nodded in agreement with a common enemy, raising both hands in agreement with her husband's words. "You should bring her back and raise her. You're so virtuous and full of righteousness. You're such a noble savior of the world. You shouldn't ignore the girl's life and death." Emolien continued to ridicule. "Why aren't you helping her up and bringing her back?" The little fellow again nodded in agreement. Everyone, that holy shit. This couple didn't look like normal people at all. The scholar's lips were trembling, and he couldn't say anything at all. The scholar angrily flicked his sleeves and turned to the girl. He reached out to help her up. "Miss, let me help you up." She testis test. T-T-T-T-T-T-S. T-test half T-S-T-T-T. T-T-T-T-T. T. T-T-T. Everyone was left speechless. T-go go 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 go. T-est. T-T-T-T. T-T-T-T-T. Shameless. "No, auntie, this one didn't do it on purpose." The scholar's face flushed red. "Coming. Young master, miss, this one has brought Coachman Chin over." Chapter 23:17. There are still 9 horses. What's the matter? Why are there so many people blocking the way? When Brother Ma returned, he couldn't help but be taken aback when he realized that there was a large crowd at the door. When he raised his head to take a closer look, he saw a tear-stained young girl and a silly scholar with an embarrassed expression on his face. Behind him were several fierce and burly men. He couldn't help but be slightly embarrassed. "Old third he, what are you doing? You brought people out to bully men and tyrannize women again, and snatch back the pink brothel to do illegal business." "Pooh." The leader of the men spat at Brother Ma and said angrily, "Ma heir, let me tell you, my business is open and above board. I, old third he, Spend a total of 15 spirit stones and real gold to buy this little slut back. Now that she wants to escape, shouldn't she return 10 times the purchase price before she escapes? Everyone couldn't help but gasp. 10 times? This old third, he really thought that human life was worthless. He asked for 10 times the redeeming fee as soon as he opened his mouth. Who would have the courage to pay him back? That clearly meant that he wanted that girl to work in the pink brothel for the rest of her life. She's also a pitiful woman, everyone thought. Everyone knew that there weren't many women who could live long after entering the pink brothel. That young lady promptly wailed out in grief, and in front of everyone's stupefied gazes, she threw herself at Emolien again. Young sir, save me. Please save Xiaohe. This girl was a fool. People always said that a fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. How could she be so foolish? This thought surfaced in everyone's minds at the same time. Sure enough, before that girl could get close to the young master, the stoic-faced little girl beside her moved again. She punched the girl's tear-stained right cheek, which was sobbing very mournfully. The girl was sent flying and landed heavily on the ground with a bang. Miss Chow shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" Zhou Huan and the rest inexplicably had the urge to burst out in laughter. It was clearly such a bloody and violent scene, but eldest Mrs. Vicious Aura was unexpectedly somewhat funny. No, I can't laugh out loud. At this moment, eldest Mrs. Mood was getting worse and worse. Her two delicate eyebrows were already knitted together. Emolien coughed lightly. She took 2 steps forward and pulled the raging little girl to her side. She stroked her head to soothe the little thing and smoothed her hair. Ignore her. Let's go. There was no need to pay attention to strange people. He didn't know where that woman called Xiao got her confidence from. To think that the crown prince would care about her life or death. Miss Xiao, who had been knocked to the ground once again, was now clenching her teeth so hard that they almost broke. If she hadn't seen that young man take out his money pouch without any hesitation and pour out 20 spirit coins without even blinking his eyes, how would she have the courage to rush over to him and ask for help? This young master had an outstanding temperament and was extraordinarily handsome. He must have come from a wealthy family. If she could be saved by the young master, she would cry a little and let him take her in as a maidservant. In the future, she would be able to enter the young master's house and enjoy wealth and splendor. But what the hell is this female stoic beside this young master? Is she a demon? Why did she repeatedly cut off my fortune and fortune? While everyone was chattering, the silent coachman Chun had already hitched up the carriage. He sat on the shaft of the carriage and looked at Emolien, Arbor, and the others. Let's go, young master. Chapter 23:18. That girl called Xiaohe's fearful gaze, as if she was looking at a devil, made Miss Chiao somewhat displeased. Where did this baffling person come from? Did she think everyone else was a fool? Why must she help? Was she utterly devoid of conscience if she didn't help? She couldn't be like this. At this moment, Old Third he led his men forward ferociously and twisted Miss Xiaohe's arms. Take her away. Old Third he was very proficient in the prostitution business. Which girl didn't cry or make a fuss in the brothel? Get used to it. Old Third he waved his hand and shouted angrily, which sounded rather imposing. No, don't let go of me, let go. Miss Xiaohe looked at everyone with teary eyes and a pitiful and pleading look. Save me, save me. Old Third he had long been irritated by her. He impatiently slapped her cheek and rebuked angrily. Don't pretend to be pitiful here. If you knew this would happen, why did you gamble so heavily in the gambling den? You asked for it. Brothers, do you know how this girl entered the brothel? She's addicted to gambling. He had sacrificed himself in the process. How much money did her brother and sister-in-law put in the past years? They can't afford it this time. She's even delusional enough to think of selling her own little niece into the brothel to pay off her debts. Wow. The crowd was in an uproar. The onlookers started gossiping, each of them beaming with joy and talking at once, all criticizing Miss Xiaohe. Xiaohe couldn't help but panic. She pulled back her hand and grabbed that scholar's sleeve, anxiously shouting, Save me, save me. The scholar was clearly at a loss. He was a weakling, so how could he face so many fierce-looking burly men? Wasn't this a joke? Seeing that Xiaohe's arms were twisted, and she was about to be pushed away, a delicate shout came from outside the crowd. Stop! What are you doing? A pair of delicate boots embroidered with plum blossoms appeared in front of everyone's eyes. They saw a 15-year-old girl walk to the front of the crowd with several green-clothed servants clearing the way. That round face was very bright and fair, and her hair was combed into a young girl's bun. Her appearance could only be described as delicate and cute, but not very beautiful. A bunch of men bullying a weak girl. Do you have any shame? This is ridiculous. The young girl reprimanded, her eyes filled with disdain as she raised her chin. Hurry up and release him. Seeing that the situation had taken a turn for the better, Xiaohe turned to look at the little girl in surprise and joy. She cried out, Miss, save me. Mississippi Coachman Chen sat on the shaft of the carriage and skillfully picked up the horsewhip. He looked in the direction of Emolien. Emolien reached out to carry the little boy and put him in the car. Jojo, are you tired? Go and sleep for a while. I'll call you out for lunch at noon. Arbor nodded. She knew Emolien's intention. She was in the carriage, so she could roll into the Peach Blossom Star at any time and come out again. After putting Jojo on the carriage, Emolien, Zhou Huan, and the others got on their horses and followed the carriage. The crowd naturally parted to the left and right, creating a passageway that wasn't too wide. It would take some effort for the carriage to pass through. Fortunately, Coachman Chen's driving skills were good, and he drove the carriage in a decent manner. Emolien wasn't someone who would meddle in other people's business. She didn't pay attention to this farce, and the few of them directly left the crowd. A gust of cold wind blew the curtain of the carriage. Arbor was playing with an exquisite hand warmer with her head down. She didn't notice that someone had passed by outside the carriage window. She suddenly stopped and turned her head. A pair of eyes that were like the stars in a cold night stared fixedly at her for a moment. To make up for yesterday's episode. Chapter 23:19. Big brother, what are you looking at? The round-faced girl kicked off her exquisite boots and grinned as she moved to the man's side. It was really strange that her big brother was staring at that carriage until his eyes were a little straight. Thump thump, thump thump. That man seemed to hear his own heart beating like a drum. The blood in his body inexplicably boiled, as if it was trying its best to get closer to that carriage. Why? What kind of strange feeling was this? He had never experienced it before. That it wasn't until he heard his sister's cry that the man inexplicably returned to his senses. He turned around and looked like he was in his 20s. He had a slender figure with sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. His pair of cold eyes swept over the girl without any warmth. Then he frowned and looked at the tearful girl behind her. Who is she? The little girl was probably already familiar with her brother's coldness. She didn't care at all as she smiled and said, Big brother, she's called Xiaohe. She's my new maid. The man obviously wasn't interested in knowing who this Xiaohe was. He only coldly swept his gaze over the blushing Xiaohe's delicate appearance, as a trace of annoyance flitted across his heart. We didn't come here to play around. Are you sure she can go to the 8 desolate mountain range? A trace of hesitation appeared on the round-faced girl's face. When she was saving the girl before, she didn't think so much at all. She only relied on her hot-bloodedness to save this girl. Now that her brother had pointed it out, she also felt that it was a little inappropriate. After all, they were going to a dangerous place like the 8 desolate mountain range. It was indeed a little cumbersome to bring a weak girl with them. However, since they had already saved the girl, they couldn't just casually throw her away and turn around to leave like this. After thinking about it, the situation was a little unreliable. The round-faced girl looked at Xiaohe hesitantly and asked with curled lips, Why don't you stay in this town for the time being? Of course, Xiaohe wouldn't comply when she heard this. It wasn't easy for her to hook up with a seemingly aristocratic family's daughter. She had the opportunity to leave this border town and fly far away, rising step by step. How could she allow herself to continue staying in this godforsaken place? If she didn't firmly grasp this opportunity in her hands, she would definitely regret it in the future. Xiaohe wept as she looked at the round-faced girl. Miss, please take me with you. I can't stay in this town anymore. My brother and sister-in-law are both gambling addicts. If I can't leave with Miss this time, my brother and sister-in-law will definitely not let me off when they come back tomorrow. Now that they have caught me, they will definitely not let me go. They will sell me to the pink brothel for spirit stones again. Please be merciful, Mississippi. Take me with you. Xiaohe begged bitterly. The girl looked at her brother. Big brother, she's so pitiful. Let's take her with us. Just now, she told me that her culinary skills are not bad. At that time, when we enter the 8 desolate mountain range and kill Xian beasts, we can even ask her to clean up and cook for us. You won't have to eat rations every day. The young man glanced at Miss Xiaohe with a sharp gaze. Xiaohe was so scared that she rolled on the ground and kowtowed to the man. Xiaohe will not be a burden to everyone. Please take me in, young master. Young master, please take me in. After he finished speaking, he kept kowtowing. Chapter 23:20. The young master didn't say anything more. He coldly glanced at Xiaohe, then turned around and left with a flick of his sleeve, leaving Xiaohe and the others a lonely and desolate figure. Xiaohe clenched her silver teeth and was very resentful. Speaking of which, her beauty far surpassed the round-faced girl beside her, but she didn't expect that the young master really didn't even look at her. He treated her like the mud under his feet, completely disdaining to give her a glance. This made her angry, but at the same time, she also had some doubts about herself. Could it be that her charm had declined? Otherwise, why would she successively suffer in front of 2 young masters in such a short period of time? Noticing that the round-faced girl's probing gaze had fallen on her, Xiaohe hurriedly restrained her emotions and lowered her head, putting on a weak and helpless appearance. The round-faced girl looked her up and down for a while. Then with a wave of her hand, she threw 6 yellow talismans to her. You don't have the slightest bit of cultivation or Xian energy, so you can't use high-level talismans. These 3 middle-level defensive talismans, 2 middle-level speed talismans, and 1 middle-level attack talisman are for you to use for self-defense. If you encounter any danger, at a critical moment, you can still save your little life. When we enter the 8 desolate mountain range, remember to follow us closely. You must not act on your own initiative and cause trouble for us. Xiaohe was stunned, then her face immediately revealed an ecstatic expression. Wow! For a servant who had just been taken in for less than an hour, 6 valuable talismans were given out in one go. Although she came from a small border town, she had also heard that things like the 5 spirit talismans could be sold for a sky-high price in the black market. This young lady's identity must be extraordinary. Her eyesight was really good. She knew that this time she must have hoped for a gold mine. As long as she worked hard in the future, she would definitely be able to become a carp leaping over the dragon gate. The round-faced girl caught up with her brother's pace. She saw him standing under an ancient banyan tree in a daze, his eyes still staring blankly at a certain place. The round-faced girl's heart was filled with doubts. In the past, she had never seen her brother reveal such an expression. This brother of hers had always been cold and indifferent to people and things. Not to mention that she was only one of his sisters. Even in front of his own sister, the most talented little genius in the family, her brother still had this cold and indifferent appearance. Even in front of his own mother, he was also like this. But now, she saw a strange light in his eyes. The round-faced girl looked in that direction curiously, and saw that it was the direction of the carriage. However, a level 8 spirit stallion's running speed was still very fast, and at this moment, they could no longer see any traces of the carriage. Brother, are you still watching? The girl could not hide the curiosity in her eyes. The man's cold voice rang out. Rest for half a day. We'll enter the mountain in the afternoon. So. Arbor and Emolien were sitting under a tree and eating barbecued meat. Beside them, 8 young people were jumping up and down, opening talismans to attack the annoying mosquitoes and flies in the forest. This was what eldest young miss had ordered them to do. To put it nicely, it was to train the speed of opening talismans. They had spent 5 to 6 days drawing these attack talismans. Sob, that the eldest young miss also said that drawing talismans required consumption. If you don't consume it, why don't you draw it? However, he felt that the current situation was not quite right. Could it be that their attack talismans were only used to deal with these little mosquitoes? Heartache talisman. Young miss. All the mosquitoes within a radius of 2 miles have been wiped out. Zhou Huan eagerly turned around and reported. Chapter 23-21. Not bad. Xiaomu nodded unhurriedly. Let's go roast some meat. Zhou Huan and the others immediately cheered and went to the side to barbecue with the food. When everyone was full and collapsed under the tree while rubbing their bellies, Arbor glanced at them indifferently and said, Tomorrow morning, everyone will hand in 15 mid-level attack talismans. No problem, right? Yes. How could there be no problem? 15 talismans in one night. How on earth should they draw them? No breakfast if you can't draw them. Arbor added another sentence. Zhou Huan Qi Hua. And the others suddenly wanted to cry. If they had known earlier, they would have secretly hidden a few attack talismans. Why did they have to use them all? The little fellow, who was full, was in a good mood and climbed into the carriage to continue sleeping. Emolian glanced at the 8 people, who looked as if they had lost their parents, and expressionlessly mounted the horse. She said to the coachman, Let's go. Anyway, her Jojo was not tormenting him. Tormenting this group of brats. He was happy to see it happen. The Bahuang mountain range is in front. The coachman slowly drove the carriage. This old man can only go to the periphery. It'll take a day and a half. Emolian did not care. Anyway, she was not in a hurry to return to Longyan City. Along the way, he still wanted to take his little wife to eat and play, and go sightseeing all the way back. Uncle Chun, is the Bahuang mountain range very scary? Arbor lifted the carriage curtain with one hand and poked his head out to ask. The coachman shook his head. This old man has never been to the Bahuang mountain range. Every time I drive the carriage, I take the outer passage. However, I heard that hundreds and thousands of people die in this mountain range every year. Many people from this academy and that sect also come here to train at the beginning of spring. It is said that many people have met with accidents. As they spoke, a few whistles sounded. Suddenly, a pair of shifty-eyed men rushed out from both sides of the mountain road. Without saying anything, they held a ball of fire in their hands and attacked the carriage. Emolian's eyes turned cold. In the old man's exclamation, a curtain of fire suddenly enveloped the carriage. The ball of fire that the shifty-eyed man threw out was instantly extinguished when it came into contact with the curtain of fire. The two of them couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, their expressions changed slightly as they looked at each other. Like burrowing rats, they really jumped into a pit behind the mountain path with a whoosh. How could Emolian allow these two people to come and go as they pleased? He directly stretched out his hand, and a scarlet flame fell into the pit with a bang. The two people who couldn't escape in time were immediately hit by the flames and let out 2 heart-wrenching screams. Rustle, 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 from the bushes on both sides of the mountain path. More than 10 people came out one after another, scrambling towards the carriage. Everyone acted as if they didn't care about their lives. Among them, a tall and thin man moved the fastest. He stepped on the shaft of the carriage and reached out to flip the curtain, that a crimson flame suddenly landed on his body, setting him on fire. Ah! That person tumbled down from the shaft of the carriage and rolled on the ground, screaming miserably. That terrifying appearance frightened many people for a moment. What are you doing? The little guy lifted the curtain and angrily looked at the dozen strangers. You want to rob us? Rob? Wasn't this obvious? The people who were scared back by Li Hua all stared blankly at the same time. Then, as if they had been injected with chicken blood, they madly jumped back into the carriage. Arbor pursed his small lips and suddenly called out, "Little Snow!" Roar! The snow leopard's enormous figure seemed to have descended from the sky. Chapter 23-22. With a whoosh, the huge figure landed in the middle of the crowd. The snow leopard's claws slapped down a few times, sending the rowdy people flying. Arbor's eyes showed traces of suspicion. He hugged his small arms and looked at the people who didn't care about their lives. What was wrong with these people? They were clearly a group of ordinary people who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. What were they thinking? Why did they have the idea of robbing people? In this group of more than 10 people, only the 2 low-level weak spirit masters could be of use. The others were all ordinary people, right? Arbor's eyes flashed. He squatted at the door of the carriage and looked at the people who were sent flying by the snow leopard. He looked at them suspiciously. They looked very suspicious. Emolian looked at the 2 people who crawled out of the pit with black faces in disdain. The horses' hooves flew out and kicked them. Bang! Bang! 2 kicks sent the 2 of them tumbling backward, their faces buried in the ground with a bitter look on their faces. Zohuan and the other 8 people took out body-securing talismans and slapped them on the people around them. A battle from start to finish definitely didn't take more than 2 minutes. More than 10 crooked people were all strangely fixed in place. They had bitter faces as they wailed. Emolian didn't get off her horse. She only waved her horse whip and pulled up a monkey-like person beside the pit and threw him to the ground. Speak, who sent you? Looking at their mysterious skills, they couldn't have been sent by the palace, that even if his uncles couldn't wait to send people to deal with him, they couldn't have sent these crooked people. Emolian couldn't help but have some doubts. Old man Chen on the side sat back down in fear. He wiped away his sweat and quickly said, "This group of people should be the bandits who occupy the outskirts of the Bahuang mountain range. They specialize in robbing merchants. If they meet a small training group, or a group from an academy or sect, they wouldn't dare to act recklessly. They usually rob small groups of 4, 5, 7 or 8 people, or trade caravans that people with discerning eyes can tell are very weak at first glance." Emolian's expression was a little uncertain. She turned to look at Zohuan and the others. "Do I look very weak?" Zohuan and the others smiled awkwardly. "How could that be? It's these people who have no foresight." In the end, he kicked a thick iron plate. Arbor jumped off the horse and ran to Emolian's side. He bent down and carried her onto the horse. "Who are these weaklings? Are they sure they didn't come here to be a joke? With such strength, how could he learn how to rob others? He would have been insta-killed in a matter of minutes." Emolian gave Zohuan a look, and the boys surrounded them. They carried the guy whose face was bruised and swollen from the crown prince's fire, walked over and urged, "Tell us the truth. Who are you people? Sirs, please spare my life. We're just a group of refugees who fled to the Bahuang mountain range because our lives were hard. Because we couldn't live anymore. We had no choice but to do this. Looking at your clothes, you seem to be living a good life." Arbor looked them up and down and said bluntly, the 2 low-level spiritual masters in the lead were a little embarrassed. "Because our luck was good before, and we robbed a few fat sheep." However, their group's long-established good luck came to an abrupt end when they met Arbor and the others. "I'm sleepy. I'll read 2 more chapters when I wake up." Chapter 23-23. Thinking of this, the leader seemed a bit depressed. Who did he offend? How did he end up kicking this iron plate? Previously, when they were hiding in the forest, it was clear that they were just a bunch of pretty boys who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Moreover, their team of 8 to 9 people also brought along a carriage. Through his unerring precise judgment, he deduced that Crown Prince Mo's team was clearly a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Who would have thought that as soon as he made his move, he would realize that things were not as he imagined. Moreover, they were heading towards a very bad situation. "Where did you guys escape from?" Arbor tilted his head and asked with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Aren't these refugees too bold? With such strength, they still dared to take over the mountain and become a bandit." "The nearby cauliflower town." A woman's frozen body stiffened as tears and snot flowed down her face. She looked regretful and sad. Miss, please let us go. We will definitely leave this place in the future and repent for our mistakes. We will never have the thought of robbing again." "You can't let us go." An unfamiliar roar sounded. A team of 20 or so people quickly ran out from the back of the mountain path. The leader was a middle-aged man who was very tall and had a very thick beard. At first glance, he looked like a savage who had come out of a primitive forest. "Young master, miss, are you guys all right?" The bearded man cupped his fist towards Emolian and looked her up and down. Seeing that they were fine, he nodded and said, "Young master probably doesn't know, This group of refugee bandits has been roaming around the outskirts of the Bahuang mountain range. They have killed and injured more than 10 merchants. I am the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu. I have taken on a mission to clear out the refugees in the southern city. I hope that the young masters and misses can make things easy for me. The bearded middle-aged man cupped his fist again and said with a sincere face, "These people are indeed extremely evil. They have killed more than one person." "No, that's not it. What he said is not true at all. Miss, we're just a bunch of refugees who were forced to flee here. We haven't done anything outrageous." The woman with tears and snot flowing down her face screamed, but she couldn't move at all. When she screamed, the muscles on her face trembled slightly, and her expression was somewhat distorted. "This mission can be checked in the Mercenary Guild. This is the truth. I'm not making things up," the bearded man said righteously. "If you don't believe me, you can follow us to the mercenary shop when you pass by the southern city. This mission was issued by a merchant in the victim's southern city. Other than our Wind Concealment Mercenary Squad, there are several other mercenary squads of various sizes vying to take on this job." Wang Lu didn't hide anything and told Mo Lian and Xiao Mu in full detail. The vice leader of the mercenary group scratched his head speechlessly. Big Brother was still as honest as ever. He had already said that it was for the sake of the mission, so it was only natural for the other party to ask for some benefits from his mercenary group. After all, this group of refugees was not defeated by their mercenary group. Of course, their mercenary group naturally had the ability to defeat this group of refugees. It was just that they did not meet them first. Arbor blinked and flicked out a silver needle from his finger, silencing the woman's wailing and howling. Noisy, the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu, was stunned and looked at the group of refugees. Chapter 23-24. The little girl's movements were very fast. He saw her snap her fingers, and the woman's screams disappeared. However, when he arrived, he discovered that the group of refugees were all fixed in place. Their bodies were strangely stiff, and they couldn't move at all. Wang Lu, the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, felt a slight respect for Arbor's group. They were very young, but they were very decisive in their actions. It seemed that they were not a simple group of people. This time, they could only negotiate properly. Wang Lu was a cautious person. Before doing anything, he would always think about his own mercenary group. If it was possible, he didn't want to attract a strong enemy for his brothers because of a wrong decision he had made when he was outside. They were all people who lived on the edge of a knife. Wang Lu cared about his brothers' lives more than anyone else. "Gentlemen, ladies, because we can't accept this mission anymore, so." Wang Lu's implication was that these refugees would not be of much use in Xiao Mu and the others' hands. "How about this? Our Wind Concealment Mercenary Group will turn in the mission, and will split the profits 50-50? Wang Lu asked carefully. He was still a little scared. After all, their mercenary group did nothing but accept a mission. They still wanted to split the profits. However, the mercenary group's current situation forced him to put down his old face. His brothers really needed this batch of profits. At least they could get some money to treat Airbao's illness. Arbor nodded his little head. "You guys can take them. There's no need to split the profits 50-50. She was so pitiful. She was not someone who needed those things. How much could a team of 20 people get from the mission? If they had to split the profits with them, it wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth." Wang Lu was stunned when he heard that. He then said emotionally, "How can we accept that? If you're embarrassed, then leave the refugees here. Our battle-crazed mercenary group will take them in. No need to be polite." Ahahaha. Suddenly, a rough laugh interrupted everyone's conversation. Battle-crazed. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu, gritted his teeth and turned his head. His eyes dimmed as he looked at the beautiful woman, who was lying in the arms of a man with a scar on his face. Mad Warrior noticed Wang Lu's gaze and deliberately grabbed the woman's waist. His bare arm tightly wrapped around the woman's body as he laughed wildly. "Ying, why didn't you say hello to Commander Wang? He's too insensible." The woman called Ying laughed coquettishly. She hung on the man's arm as if her bones were broken. She gave Wang Lu a look of disdain and said in a disdainful tone, "Greetings, Commander Wang." Ha ha ha. Berserker laughed heartily and raised his hand. 40 to 50 of his men rushed forward and tied up the refugees. "Take him away," Berserker shouted. Wang Lu's subordinates cursed with bloodshot eyes. "Mad warrior, you despicable man. Are you trying to steal our business again? What? You don't like it?" Berserker laughed loudly. The scar on his face was ugly and twisted like a centipede. "Even if you don't like it, you better hold it in." Berserker raised his eyebrows and snorted. "Brothers, take him away." Ow. Chapter 23-25. A ball of light blue pure fire danced slightly in the little girl's hand, looking very transparent and gorgeous. However, it contained traces of power that caused one's heart to tremble. "You think too highly of yourself," Miss Chiao scolded sternly. "Did I say you could leave? Damn it. What kind of flame was that?" Berserker touched his shoulder. The outer layer of his clothes was scorched, but other than that, his body did not suffer any damage. This caused him to be suddenly shocked, but his mood slowly relaxed. Only then did he have time to size up Arbor. With one look, he could not help but be shocked. Although the little girl looked young, in another 1 or 2 years, she would be amazing. She would definitely bloom like a flower in full bloom. Compared to that clean, white and delicate little face. And then looking at the idiot in his arms with heavy makeup, a strong feeling of disdain emerged from Berserker's heart. Berserker pushed away the spineless woman in his arms and walked a few steps forward with a laugh. He sized up Arbor and said, "I Berserker was rude just now. I didn't have time to discuss it with the little girl." His centipede scar was distorted from his smile. "How about this? Our Berserker mercenary group's base is not far from here in the southern city. Why don't you come back to the base with us and discuss it properly? Let's see if it's 50-50 or 60-40. What do you think?" The little girl looked like she was playing with the flame in her hand. It only looked scary on the outside, but when it hit him, it was like scratching an itch. When he got this little girl into his base, Berserker was thinking about the girl wretchedly in his heart when he saw a red-hot flame pounce at his feet. Before he could react, the flame soared and burned around him. Now the taste of it was truly satisfying. Berserker howled and took a few steps back, but his body was still imprisoned by the circle of flame. He opened up a defensive shield, but he still felt like he was almost a piece of fat pork in the fire, being roasted by the hot flames with sizzling sounds. Arbor lowered her little head and casually played with the little blue ball of fire in her hand. Just now, Prince Mo's furious attack made her feel a little puzzled. At the same time, she looked up at her husband. "Disgusting guy, let him die here." Emolien's eyes flashed with killing intent. As a man, he naturally understood the wretched light in the scar-faced man's eyes. He actually dared to think about his wife in front of him. His death was not enough to be regretted. Arbor tugged at her sleeve and gently tossed the blue fireball in his hand. The crown prince couldn't help but laugh. With a flick of his sleeve, he retrieved the red flame. He lowered his head to look at her and said softly, "Jojo, you used too little spiritual energy just now." Arbor was expressionless. "Too many. I'll kill them in one hit." Zhou Huan and the others were speechless. Should he sympathize with that idiot from the battle-crazed mercenary group? He actually dared to look down on their young Mississippi. This old fellow was most likely going to be in big trouble. For the first time, Arbor actually held a fireball in his hand. He had a lot of fun playing with fire. A ball of blue flame, accompanied by a gust of wind, bounced onto Berserker's clothes with a whoosh. Hee hee hee, hee hee. Berserker's face was burned black by Emolien's fire. At this time, when he saw the blue flame coming, he hurriedly raised his defensive shield to block it. "You can only take it if I give it to you." Arbor coldly glanced at Berserker. 5, 6, 7, 8 small fireballs continuously appeared between his fingers and whooshed towards Berserker's body. Chapter 23-26. If I don't give it to you, don't even think about getting half a share. Arbor expressionlessly withdrew the little blue fireball in his hand. Do you understand? The Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader finally understood what kind of little fiend he had provoked. This time, he completely understood the power of the little blue fireball. The blue flame directly burned a hole in his defensive barrier. The blue flame covered his skin, and just like the scarlet flame from before, it roasted him until he jumped back and forth and screamed. When the others saw this, they all revealed terrified expressions. How was this possible? Their Berserk Battle Captain was an 8th level Spirit Master, who controlled a 5th level of spiritual fire. What the hell was the blue flame in that girl's hand? Why was it able to burn a level 8 Spirit Master with 5 layers of spiritual fire? Berserk Battle's face was filled with fear. His neck and body were covered in bruises. Looking at Arbor with fear in his eyes, Berserk Battle could not hide the deep fear in his heart. "You, who the hell are you people?" Berserker cried out in fear, trying to put on a brave front. Arbor coldly glanced at him. "Who am I? You don't need to know." After saying that, his gaze indifferently shifted to Zhou Huan and the others. The latter immediately understood, and went forward to tie up the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader. At this time, the other members of the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group finally reacted, and pointed at Zhou Huan and the others, cursing angrily. "What are you doing? Let go of him. Let go of our leader. Quick, our Berserk Battle Mercenary Group is a 3rd level mercenary group. You guys can't afford to offend us." Bah! Zhou Huan unceremoniously spat at them, and directly stepped forward, pressing the Berserk Battle Mercenary Group's leader to the ground. The other mercenaries of Berserker were furious. Just as they were about to swarm up, Zhou Huan and the other 8 Talisman Masters made a move at the same time. They nimbly took out a handful of body-securing talismans from their inner worlds and threw them at those people without hesitation. Miss said that when fighting, there was no need to feel sorry for the talismans. The talismans could be drawn again, but if the person was gone, there would be nothing left. They felt that what the eldest young Miss said was extremely correct. Thus, at this moment, when they were fighting against the battle-crazed mercenary group, they no longer felt heartache about the consumption of talismans. You can do whatever you want. After all, Miss has plenty of blank talismans. If he ran out, he could just work through the night and continue painting. The group of crazed battle mercenary band members simply hadn't expected that Zhou Huan's group of 8 were actually all talisman masters. Although the talismans they threw out were all mid-level talismans, and many of them might not be able to freeze people in place at once, but they couldn't withstand so many talismans flying over together. Not everyone in the battle-crazed mercenary group was a spirit realm cultivator. Some mystic cultivators with slightly lower levels were pitifully immobilized under the effects of the immobilization talisman. As a result, at least half of the 20 or so members of the battle-crazed mercenary group were locked down by Zhou Huan's group. The rest of the pitiful sects were swarmed by Zhou Huan, Qi Hua, and the others. They were pressed to the ground and beaten up. After this fat beating, the Berserker mercenary group cried out and begged for mercy. Among them, there were 3 stubborn vice-regiment commanders who were the focus of Zhou Huan and the others. The group of talisman masters' cultivation might not be as good as theirs, but they had talismans in their hands. Seeing one of the vice-regiment commanders stiffen his neck and vainly attempt to lead the group members to break out of the encirclement, Qi Hua promptly made a decision to open an attack talisman. Chapter 23-28. Quang Zhan shuddered, and didn't dare to provoke the man in front of him anymore. He felt that if he said another word, not only would his teeth shatter, but his entire head would also shatter. "What about you guys?" Arbor wasn't affected by Quang Zhan's words, and turned to ask the leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Group, Wang Lu, laughed bitterly. "We only have 23 brothers in our group, and one of them is still seriously injured. Now, we can only be considered a small second-class mercenary group." Arbor sized up Wang Lu and nodded his little head. He still said expressionlessly, "I see that you have a good face. You should have great prospects in the future. Work hard with your brothers, and you will be successful one day." Everyone was speechless. Emolien's mouth twitched. When did this little guy of hers become a fortune teller? Alright, you guys pack up and take these refugees away. The leader of the Wind Concealment Mercenary Corps cupped his hands at Xiao Mu in gratitude. Miss, I can't thank you enough for your great kindness. In the future, if you need me, Wang Lu, for anything, you can come to the southern city to find me. Damn you, you heartless bastard. You actually handed us over to the mercenary group. Are you trying to force us, the weak and powerless refugees, to die? You cursed. Ouch. That shrew started cursing again. But before she could finish cursing, her mouth was stuffed with a ball of mud. She could only stare at Arbor with a pair of eyes that were bulging like dead fish. If they were handed over to the mercenary group and brought back to South City, they would face the fate of being imprisoned and awaiting execution. Arbor cast a cold glance at the shrew. If today we were just a group of ordinary people, we would be the ones to suffer. So wasn't this the rule that you guys set? The weak were prey to the strong, and the strong were respected. People had to pay the price for what they did. What was there to be indignant about? The Wind Concealment Mercenary Group left with the group of refugees, leaving behind a group of bitter battle-crazed mercenary group members. When Scarface saw that Hidden Wind's people had all left, he inexplicably became nervous. Just by looking at the way that girl dealt with the refugees, she didn't seem like a soft-hearted person. Would she kill them all? Kill them all? You, what are you doing? Berserker's lips trembled as he looked at the girl, who was approaching him step by step. He always felt that there was a storm under her eyes. He wouldn't kill them all, would he? Mad Warrior's heart trembled. Hand it over. Mad Warrior was dumbfounded. What? Arbor raised a small fist and punched him on the left side of his face. Are you going to hand it over or not? The corners of Emolien's mouth twitched as she silently raised her hand to cover her face. Great Aunt, hand it over? What do you want us to hand it over? Stop pretending. Arbor felt that the man in front of him was pretending. How could he not know the consequences of losing a robbery? This guy had been pretending from the beginning, and now he still wanted to continue pretending. He was simply asking for a beating. Arbor raised her small fist again and punched Mad Warrior's right face. Hand it over. Mad Warrior really wanted to cry. He really didn't know what this little girl wanted him to hand over. On the other hand, the deputy leader, who was beaten up and had a bloody nose and a swollen face, seemed to have a flash of inspiration as he hurriedly stuttered. Leader, quick, hand over the resources in your inner world. Chapter 23-29. What? Berserker's face contorted, and his entire jaw almost fell off. You. This guy actually wanted to rob the Berserker mercenary group so matter-of-factly? On what basis? Bam! Arbor received another punch to the jaw and said coldly, You don't want your eyes anymore? Berserker wished he could cry. Cough. Emolien walked forward with her hands behind her back and stood in front of Berserker. She spoke for Arbor. Hurry up, don't dawdle. Arbor nodded. That's right. What husband said was exactly what she was too lazy to say. These people were too dawdling. They should have handed over the goods long ago, and then everyone could have counted and distributed them. Berserker silently wept. With a flick of his finger, he suddenly took out a small basket of things from his inner world. Arbor looked back, and her gaze instantly hardened. She ruthlessly kicked the man's lower abdomen, scaring him into screaming. Emolien held back her laughter and put on a stern face. Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? These words actually sounded a bit familiar. Arbor froze and then turned to look at Berserker, who still had lingering fear. Hand it over, everyone hand it over. Berserker hurriedly took out a lot of things from his inner world. Most of them were pills, spirit stones, and the like. The Berserker mercenary group's members all had bitter expressions as they dug things out of their inner worlds. Among them, 3 mystic cultivators didn't have inner worlds, so they could only use their eyes to signal Zohuan and the others to untie them. After rummaging around their bodies for a long time, they finally found some good stuff and handed it over. Arbor looked at the goods piled up into a small mountain on the ground and pursed her lips noncommittally. Poor! Such a pile of scrap metal. There was nothing good that could be brought out. Zohuan. Yes, Go divide this pile of junk and bring it all. Arbor waved her small hand. She didn't care about these lousy things at all. Zhou Huan and the others, on the other hand, were overjoyed. They hurriedly sat down and divided the spoils. One by one, everyone was beaming with joy. At this moment, Berserker's tears had already flowed to his stomach. He really didn't check the almanac before leaving the house today. He actually provoked such an ominous star. She hoped that she would never meet this couple again in this life, or in her next life. When Arbor saw the Berserker mercenary group's drooping head with a pained expression on his face, he couldn't help but feel a little better. That was good. She was happy to see him unhappy. Well, since the matter here has been settled, let's continue our journey. Emolian was secretly amused, but her face did not reveal any clues. Old Man Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the front of the car and said, "If we hurry up, we can reach the next accommodation before dark." "There's no hurry," Emolian said calmly. "Jojo, do you want to pick some herbs to bring back?" "There's no need for that." Arbor glanced at the barren herbs nearby. She looked over and saw a low-grade herb growing not far away. It didn't look like a place that would produce any good herbs. The two people rode on the same horse. Emolian raised his hand to ruffle the strands of the little fellow's disheveled black hair at her temples. "Then let's have Uncle Chun hurry to the lodging point." Arbor nodded and snuggled in Emolian's arms. She said calmly, "Don't be afraid. It's fine even if we have to eat and sleep in the open." Actually, she really wasn't that precious. However, Emolian had always pampered her, which made her feel a little helpless. "Sleep, sleep, I'll catch up on it tomorrow morning." Chapter 2330. Wait. The Battle Berserker mercenary band looked at the people from Arbor, who had turned around and left. They couldn't help but howl in their hearts. "Brothers, let them go first. Where did these people come from? Does anyone know that they have such a bloody personality?" Battle Berserker shook his body. A small rope naturally wouldn't be able to bind a group of spirit masters like them. Unfortunately, the other party had attached spirit power to the rope. The Battle Berserker mercenary band wanted to cry. 2 hours later, the Battle Berserker mercenary band's reinforcements arrived. When they saw the people who came, the Battle Berserker mercenary band's members really cried out, Young Master Chen, Miss Roi, help." The people who came were the round-faced girl and her group that had saved Xiaohe in the border town. The man called Young Master Chen had a cold face. He raised his hand and had his subordinates come forward to rescue the Battle Berserker mercenary band. What happened? Because they needed to find a lot of materials on this trip. They had already booked a mercenary band and said that they would meet on the outskirts of the 8 Desolate Mountain Range. They just didn't expect Battle Berserker to be tied up here. Speaking of which, Battle Berserker mercenary band was one of the top mercenary bands in South City. They didn't know what had happened to make them so miserable. Battle Berserker wiped away the blood on his face and gritted his teeth. "We were set up by a group of shameless people." The round-faced girl called Miss Roi crossed her arms in front of her chest and glanced at Battle Berserker. "Did you take on another mission? You don't look like you're being honest." Battle Berserker's face twitched slightly. He did take on a refugee mission. Since he was going to accompany young Master Chun to search for materials in the 8 Desolate Mountain Range, he might be able to meet the refugees and turn in the mission. But he didn't expect that Battle Berserker's wishful thinking would turn out to be unsatisfactory. Young Master Chen glanced at them coldly and said faintly, "Do you want to rest? How could they help find materials in this state?" Young Master Chen and Miss Roi both frowned and sized up the Battle Berserker mercenary band. "I'm fine. Young Master Chen and Miss Royi's time is precious. Let us be on our way." Wild Warrior hurriedly smiled fawningly. What a joke. They had just lost a large amount of resources. If they didn't perform well now and annoyed young Master Chen, wouldn't they be even more unlucky if he didn't give them a single cent? Since Berserker and the others said that it was fine, young Master Chen nodded and led the group towards the outer mountain range. The 8 Desolate Mountain Range was extremely large. It was divided into 3 major regions: the outer region, the central region, and the inner region. To be honest, No one had been able to enter the central region for so many years. Occasionally, one or two teams would enter, but they would use their strength to prove that they wouldn't be able to come out. Therefore, as time passed, even fewer people would go to the central region of the 8 desolate mountain range to throw away their lives. The things that young Master Chun wanted were all located in the outskirts. It was just that the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range had been excessively deforested in recent years. However, he knew that there was a relatively hidden mountain here. If he searched carefully, he could still find a lot of ores crystals. Ugh! They'd just reached the mountain peak that young Master Chin had mentioned when they saw a carriage parked there from afar. Chapter 2331. Beside them sat 10 young men and women, plus an old man. They were sitting around a bonfire cooking food. They didn't look like a team that came to the Ba Huang mountain range to train. Instead, they looked like they came here to have a picnic. Big brother. Miss Rowie looked strangely at her brother, who was standing in front of her and couldn't even move his feet. She couldn't help but frown. Why did Big Brother look so strange? Her line of sight followed her brother's gaze and landed on a little girl with a wooden expression. The little girl was wrapped in a furry floral cloak. She held a branch in one hand and was slowly poking at the fire. Her appearance was indeed very exquisite and beautiful, but her brother's personality was cold and unsociable. He was never someone who would be charmed by beauty. Why was he so abnormal today? Rowie raised her eyes and glanced at the little girl again. Occasionally, sparks would float out from the fire. As soon as they flickered, a slender hand would immediately grab her little claws and rub them in the palm of his hand. Whether it was appearance or bearing, that young master didn't lose to her brother. She hadn't seen such an outstanding man in the Divine Continent for a long time. Zhou Huan and a group of people surrounded the bonfire and ate a rather fat roe deer, as if there was no one else around them. They chattered happily. Delicious, delicious. Roasted deer meat, fat and tender. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect to find a deer on the Divine Continent. Unlike when they were in Shuntian Prefecture, there weren't many things that could be eaten in the mountains and forests. Many animals and plants had mutated. Just looking at them was disgusting. Would you dare to eat them? They just haven't eaten them yet, Arbor said lightly. This didn't mean that Tian Yun and the others would let go of this fertile continent. Zhou Huan and the others were stunned, but they didn't ask anything. Although the little girl was expressionless, she had already thrown several small animals into the pasture garden on Paradise Planet when everyone was catching the deer. Jojo, drink the soup. Emolian smiled and scooped a small bowl of meat soup into her hand. Prince Mo's heart was filled with happiness as he watched her lower her head like a small animal and sip the soup in small mouthfuls. He just liked to feed this little fellow. It would be good to raise it until it was white and plump. She was so soft that he wanted to take a bite out of her. Young Master Chin, Miss Roe, how about we leave first? The one who spoke was Berserker, the leader of the Berserker mercenary group. When he saw the carriage, his eyelids started twitching. When they got closer and realized that it was Arbor's group, they had a bad feeling. Didn't they agree that it would be best if they never met again in this lifetime? How come it hadn't even been 4 hours, and they were already up against this group of fiends? Berserker didn't notice at all that his voice was trembling a little. He looked like a frightened quail that couldn't wait to escape from the jaws of a tiger. Miss Softclothes saw Mad Warrior's cowardly look, and she inadvertently glanced at him. She crossed her arms and said, "What's wrong, Mad Warrior? We didn't spend money to get you to come here, so that the Berserker mercenary group could idle around and do nothing. Hurry up and bring your brothers to the nearby mountains to help look." Mad Warrior wanted to cry but had no tears. He glanced at young Master Chun, who was pursing his lips and not speaking. Chapter 2332. Seeing that the other party didn't react, she hastily stammered. Young Master Chin, we can actually search in other mountains. This place. Just go if I tell you to. What are you blabbering on about? Miss Roe glared at him with dissatisfaction. It's such a big mountain. How could everything have been dug up by someone else? Big Brother had said that this place was rich in resources. It was just that when Big Brother had come here for his training, his inner world wasn't enough to hold so many things by himself. Therefore, he'd picked a time to bring everyone here. The 8 desolate mountain range was very large, and not all of the outer areas had been explored. Some hidden places were still unexplored. With a bitter expression, Berserker Jean walked behind Xiao Mu and the others with his cowardly brothers to search for ores everywhere. Arbor's group didn't pay them any attention from beginning to end. They sat around the fire and shared the fresh and delicious deer meat. The broth emitted waves of fragrance in the air, causing Miss Ro-Yi to involuntarily gulp. Xiaohe. Ha. Miss Ro-Yi was at the back of the group, secretly watching Prince Emo in a daze, and looking at Miss Qiao with envy. When she heard this, Miss Ro-Yi hurriedly took a few steps forward and bowed respectfully to Miss Ro-Yi. Miss, do you have any orders? Ro-Yi's cold face relaxed slightly when she saw her respectful gaze. I'll go walk around the forest in a bit and bring back some game for you to roast. Xiaohe immediately felt a bit uneasy and couldn't help but wipe her hands on her clothes. Ro-Yi didn't notice her expression and led the group into the forest. They returned not long after, carrying 2 rabbits and a pheasant in their hands. It looked like they'd had quite a bountiful harvest. However, when they piled these bloody things in front of Miss Ro-Yi, she looked like she was about to faint. Ro-Yi looked very angry. Xiaohe, you told me that you were proficient in cooking. It wasn't just a lie, was it? Of course not, it wasn't. Xiaohe shook her head like a rattle drum and quickly said, My cooking skills are very, very good. It's just that I can't bear to see these bloody things. Ri was so angry that she couldn't say anything. If a kitchen maid could not bear to see things with blood, then she could only stir-fry vegetables all day long. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that saving this useless woman was simply a waste of time. Ro-Yi coldly ordered the 2 burly men under her to move the prey to the stream and wash them. Then, she brought the food back for Xiaohe to cook. Xiaohe's cooking skills could be said to be that it was an extremely tragic sight. When the battle-crazed mercenary group returned without any success, they saw Miss Ro-Yi staring at a girl in front of her with a dark face, loudly reprimanding and lecturing her. You don't know how to cook. Miss Ro-Yi was so angry that she threw the burnt and ugly rabbit on the grill at Xiaohe. The rabbit was roasted until it was scalding hot. When it was thrown onto Xiaohe's body, it was so hot that she couldn't help but cry out, Young master, please spare me. She actually rolled towards Miss Ro-Yi's brother and stretched out her jade-like arms, about to hug the young master. Miss Ro-Yi was so angry that her face turned red. Chapter 2333. Baby Qiao was chewing on a piece of meat and holding it in her mouth, almost forgetting to swallow it. Emolian couldn't help but laugh at her little appearance. She raised a hand to rub her little face and said softly, Eat. Xiaomu moved her small mouth and swallowed the food, her eyes darting around as she surveyed the lively scene on the other side. Slap. Young Master Chen's expression didn't change at all. With a flick of his sleeve, he swept away Xiaohe who had pounced on him. He allowed her to fall heavily on her back next to the pile of charred food. This young Master Chen completely treated her as a piece of trash, and didn't even spare her a glance. Miss Ro-Yi walked over and slapped her cheek, without any trace of politeness. Lowly servant, what are you thinking? Do you think that you're a celestial immortal? Do you think my big brother would fancy a piece of trash like you? What kind of joke was this? How many of the noble ladies in the capital ran after her brother? Her brother didn't even look at a single one of them. Not to mention a shrew in the countryside. Where did she get the confidence to think that such a cold and noble person, like her brother, would fancy a foolish woman like her? Why would I save a piece of trash like you with that cheap face of yours? My brother has good taste. No wonder he didn't approve of me taking you in at first sight. You're courting death by causing trouble. Miss Ro-Yi felt that her new servant girl was an utter disgrace to her. Without hesitation, she stretched out her leg and kicked Xiaohe, sending her rolling on the ground. You can scram now. Our Mu family can't afford a lowly servant girl like you with ulterior motives. Sir Jojo, who had been watching the show with his mouth agape, was startled when he heard this. The Mu family? She surreptitiously sized up the siblings, and happened to see the young master looking at her with a deep gaze. Her gaze seemed to be very infectious. It was bottomless and vast like smoke. Just one glance was enough to make Jojo's heart skip a beat. A strange feeling arose in her heart. It was an unusually strange feeling, just like when she'd discovered Long Chuyen in the wilderness of the secret realm. A small trace of suspicion arose in her heart. She didn't know why before. But now, she was very certain that this was the attraction of bloodlines. At the same time that she was sizing up Mu Xingqian was also intently sizing her up. When his pitch-black and deep eyes looked at Xiao Mu, he himself could sense that the blood flowing in his veins was clamoring for a surging emotion in his heart. Emil Yen naturally noticed that the little fellow and another man were staring at each other for a long time. Although he didn't know what was going on, he still turned the little fellow's head back protectively. "What's wrong?" Arbor blinked and picked up a piece of deer meat in his hand. He tore a piece and chewed it. "I don't know. It's definitely not a good thing to see someone from the Mu family." Emil Yen was aware of the knot between her and the Mu clan. She couldn't help but laugh. She glanced in the direction of Mu Xingqian and the rest. "Ignore them. Let's set up camp after we finish eating." They had originally wanted to hurry to their accommodation, but Arbor suddenly called for them to stop. Then they got off the carriage to clean up the crystal mines here. Emil Yen and Arbor discussed for a while, and decided to set up camp here to rest for the night. They would continue their journey tomorrow. Anyway, the environment here was good, so they weren't in a hurry to rush to the next stop. Zhou Huan and the rest naturally didn't have any objections. They were a group of boorish men who could eat and live anywhere. Chapter 2334. "Miss, have we met before?" Mu Xingqian suddenly asked. The moment he spoke, Zhou Huan and the others laughed shamefully. "Damn, I say, this young master. Isn't your opening line to strike up a conversation with a lady a bit too old-fashioned?" "Isn't that so? We don't have to do that anymore." Mu Xingqian didn't pay attention to Zhou Huan and the other's sarcasm. His gaze was still fixed on the back of Arbor's head, and he said with determination, "I have a strange feeling about you. Mu Roi!" Exclamation point. "TSK, my big brother. You're really something today." The cold-blooded ice heart, that hadn't moved for 1,000 years, was inexplicably moved by a girl he'd only met once. If news of this spread back to the capital, all the young ladies and young wives would cry themselves to death. Be big brother. Mu Roi wanted to pinch herself. What the hell was she doing? Why was she stuttering? It was obvious that her brother was the one in the wrong. It wasn't right to run up to a girl and strike up a conversation, especially when there was a covetous fiancé squatting next to her. "Big brother, cough, it seems that there are no more oars here. Why don't we go somewhere else?" Not only was her stomach full of anger from eating, but her big brother was also acting strangely. Mu Roi felt very tired. Mu Xingqian stared at Xiao Mu without moving or blinking. Although the young lady had only shown him the back of her head from beginning to end, Mu Xingqian did not know why. But he felt that he could also feel the excitement of the blood flowing through his body when he looked at the back of this little fellow's head. "I think I'm familiar with you," Mu Xingqian said. "My name is Mu Xingqian. May I know your name?" Prince Imo couldn't bear it anymore and returned a cold glare. "I'm not familiar with you. Don't pretend to be family halfway." Miss Xiao He, who was lying on the ground, felt that the jealousy in her heart was about to burn her clean. None of these damned men put her Xiao He in their eyes. That young Master Chen, from the first time she saw him, had always had a cold face and kept people 1,000 miles away. Just now, he had brushed her aside so coldly, completely treating her as a smear of dirt that would stain his clothes. He had brushed her aside cleanly. She said that his temperament had always been cold, and he did not know what tenderness was. Who would have thought that he would shamelessly chase after a girl, wanting to know her name? The Mu family. That was what the lofty Miss Softclothes had said just now. From this, it could be seen that they were truly aristocratic families from the imperial capital. How could she leave so easily? At this moment, Xiao He had crawled to Mu Roi's feet and cried as she hugged her leg and begged for mercy, causing Mu Roi to be extremely annoyed. Mu Roi was currently worrying about her elder brother's matters. How could she have the time to argue with this lowly servant? She directly kicked her away and roared, "Get lost!" He turned his face to the side and looked at his elder brother, Mu Xingchen, with furrowed brows. His elder brother had always been cold, aloof and arrogant. When had he ever been so persistent, and wanted to ask for the name of a young lady? Miss Chiao turned her delicate, snow-white face, and expressionlessly looked at Mu Xingchen. "I'm not familiar with you." "Impossible." Mu Xingchen stubbornly shook his head. "Little girl, I can sense that you're different. In the sea of thousands of people and the boundless stars, I can recognize you at a glance." Chapter 2335. Mu Royi's jaw dropped. She then looked at the burly men around her. Every single one of them was so shocked that their eyeballs seemed to have fallen out of their sockets. Holy shit. Elder brother is really something. Look at these words of love, right? What sea of people? What vast stars? What can I recognize you at a glance? These words of love were endless. No wonder the face of the guy beside the little girl darkened. It was indeed unbearable, wasn't it? How can you speak so carelessly in front of someone else's lover? Elder brother, I can't help you anymore. With a stoic face, our dear Qiao Mu sized up Mu Xingchen from head to toe. Scram! Everyone, that brave warrior. She was the only one who dared to shout at the genius young master of a talisman family in China. That Mu Roi twitched her mouth. And it was only now that she carefully examined Qiao Mu from head to toe again. Little sister, throw it. Who's your little sister? Arbor's cold face met Mu Royi's warm face with a warm smile. The latter's expression stiffened. She coughed lightly and said, "Little cough cough little girl. Actually my elder brother doesn't mean any harm. He, Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Holy shit, what kind of person is this? Why did he throw blue fireballs without saying anything?" Mu Royi's eyes twitched when she saw the fireballs being thrown over. Don't go overboard. You're going overboard, little girl. You're going overboard. Fuck. 17 or 18 small fireballs whizzed over and smashed towards her and her elder brother's faces without any explanation. Damn it, don't hit people's faces. Mu Roi immediately flicked out 2 defensive talismans to protect herself. On the other side, her elder brother's expression was as calm as the wind and clouds. There was even a hair-raising smile hanging at the corner of his mouth. He gently took out a talisman and blocked in front of the fireballs. Bam, bam, bam. The blue fireballs landed outside the defensive circle one after another. She thought that her elder brother's yellow-level defensive talisman would be able to block the fireballs. Who knew? Mu Roi opened her mouth and quickly retreated a few steps. She cowardly hid behind her elder brother. When he looked up, he saw his elder brother waving his sleeves and extinguishing the small fireballs that had broken through his defense. Mu Roi didn't say anything, but she was cursing in her heart. This damned girl was really fucking serious. The small fireball that she threw out was actually able to break through the yellow-grade defensive talisman's circle. If she hadn't made the prompt decision to hide behind Big Brother, she reckoned that she would have been injured by now. Stinky girl. Mu Roi jumped up with her hands on her hips. However, before he could start cursing, he saw the other party's actions and his eyes bulged. What the fuck? You're still doing it. Little meteor shower. Arbor's merciless change in attitude was truly intoxicating. Zhou Huan and the others, who were originally sitting beside her and eating barbecue, quickly jumped up and retreated with the food in their hands. On the other end, Miss Chiao had already leaped up. The black light of the ferrule in her hand flowed as she shouted. Hundreds and thousands of little blue fireballs smashed towards Mu Xingchen and Mu Roi. Mu Roi really wanted to cry. She had never seen a girl like this in her entire life, who would start a fight with you for no reason, without saying anything. Furthermore, this mysterious strength of hers seemed a little frightening. Mu Roi turned around and saw the battle-crazed mercenary group hiding behind a row of trees. Only half of their heads were sticking out as they vigilantly looked over. Chapter 2336. The group of bastards from the Berserk Battle mercenary group were more than 10 meters away from the siblings. He had already found a place to hide and was prepared to avoid the attack. This bunch of useless bastards. Muroi was furious. In the next second, she abandoned her big brother and ran away in a panic. She kept muttering, "Big brother, don't force yourself." Mu Xingqian looked expressionlessly at the pile of small blue fireballs that were flying towards him. A jade talisman array appeared around his body. 24 pieces of jade talismans formed a yellow-level defensive talisman array, and it suddenly lit up beside him. Abundant talisman power enveloped his entire body. In an instant, his tall and straight figure appeared exceptionally tall, handsome, and otherworldly in the world. Bang 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 bang. After a round of wild explosions, the man stood in the defensive array and looked at Arbor with a calm expression. His eyes dimmed a little. He didn't know what he was feeling, but he was a little depressed. He had been cold to people since he was young. He thought that his personality was like this, but today, he inexplicably felt that he almost couldn't recognize himself. Could it be that he wasn't a cold-hearted person? Arbor glared at Mu Xingqian angrily. Why didn't it even hit the corner of his clothes? Great meteor shower. Everyone. Too much. Too much, little girl. Little girl. Mu Roi, who was hiding behind the tree, was like the group of bastards from the Berserk Battle mercenary group. She only stuck her head out from behind the tree, stretched out her fingers, and shouted anxiously. Zhou Huan. And the others were speechless. Could it be that the name of the eldest Miss Spiritual Technique was from a book? Or did she just casually make it up? Why did it sound so weird? Mo Lian's mouth twitched, but she knew her little wife very well. This was definitely not the original spiritual technique name. It was just that the little guy had made up a small meteor to make it easier to distinguish. Qi Hua, and the others' jaws dropped. When they looked up and saw the large meteor shower, they, who were in the same camp, couldn't help but take dozens of steps back. Holy shit, young miss is too fierce. Every ball of blue fire in this large meteor shower was the size of a wash basin. Compared to the small meteor shower he had played with before, it was much stronger. Don't. Let's talk nicely. Young lady. Mu Roi jumped out from behind the tree, but in less than 3 seconds, she hurriedly moved back more than 10 meters to avoid the incoming heat wave. Fuck, this temperamental grand aunt is getting serious. Crackle, crackle, crackle. A flaming meteor instantly broke through the defensive array glyphs, and a large number of fireballs smashed towards Mu Xingqian. In the nick of time, Mu Xingqian brandished a long sword in his hand and slashed forward with a heat wave. He had already moved out along the path that had been opened up. The entire large meteor shower instantly smashed into the air, directly smashing a deep crater in the ground. The commotion caused the beasts on the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range to roar in fear. Arbor blinked and lowered his head to look at his little hand. He was a little dazed and cute. It didn't hit? Mu Xingqian isn't just a yellow-level great talisman master. His cultivation is also far above yours. It's impossible for someone who controls 9 levels of spiritual fire to be hurt by the blue spiritual cleansing flame. As expected, he was a genius. No wonder old Bai, who was by Mu Jingrui's side, was so fanatical in protecting their young master. It was time to sleep. Chapter 2337. Was she a genius with extraordinary talent? If that was the case, Arbor's gaze turned cold. With a flick of his finger, dozens of 8 trigrams binding talismans flew up and rushed toward Mu Xingqian. At the same time, attack talismans and 5 spirit talismans followed suit. It was as if they were going to smash Mu Xingqian to death. A stream of wind appeared in the little girl's hand, and she pounced in front of Mu Xingqian without any warning. The 3 lightning spirit talismans in her hand had already descended from the sky and were smashing down fiercely. The battle-crazed mercenary group was on the verge of collapse. If they had to use a word to describe their current feelings, it would probably be the feeling of 10,000 heads running through their hearts. Lightning spirit talisman. 5 spirit talisman. What talisman is that? Mu Roi had already come out from behind the tree. Her mouth was agape as she stared at the girl who was about the same age as her, in shock. What was going on? An unfamiliar girl's talisman skills were actually more outstanding than all the young disciples of the talisman patrician family? Could it be that she was still dreaming? Was what she was seeing not real? However, seeing that her elder brother was temporarily unable to break free from the effects of the 8 trigrams binding talismans, Mu Royi's eyes truly flashed with a trace of uncertainty. Elder brother. Super large meteor shower. Miss Qiao leapt high into the air. She was already floating in the air as she looked down expressionlessly. The ferrule, which was connected to her mind, came out from under her sleeve with a whoosh and went straight for Mu Xingqian's head. No! Mu Royi's pupils shrank as she screamed. Emolian. Zhou Huan and the others' jaws once again dropped to the ground. They thought that the great meteor shower was the ultimate move that eldest miss could use at the moment. But they didn't expect that there was actually a super meteor shower in this world, that they really knelt down before eldest miss. Was she really a human and not a demon? Mu Xingqian was temporarily immobilized by 4 or 5 8 trigrams binding talismans. When he looked up, he saw bursts of lightning accompanied by dark clouds, and a large fiery meteor shower smashing down on top of his head. Time seemed to have stopped. Everyone was filled with trepidation and cold sweat, waiting for the arrival of the thunder fire. However, all of the attacks stopped in that instant. The thick flaming meteor nebula covered the sky above Mu Xingqian's head. It stopped. The little girl looked down coldly at the man who was standing still under the encirclement of attack talismans. There wasn't the slightest fluctuation in her eyes, as she just looked at him coldly. Step by step, he walked up to him and asked coldly, "Why aren't you fighting back?" "I don't want to." This inexplicable feeling of bloodline resonance made him particularly reluctant to attack her. Not at all. He did not want to hurt her, not even the slightest bit. Mu Xingqian frowned slightly. Arbor glanced at him coldly and leaned in a few inches. She stared into his dark and still eyes and said word by word, "Mu clan, you better not provoke me again. Otherwise, when I get angry, I'll turn your entire Mu clan upside down and make you wish you were dead. Remember what I said today." Arbor glanced at him coldly. "I hope that day doesn't come. Miss, may I know your name?" "Not a single person from the Mu clan deserves to know my name." Chapter 2338. Arbor coldly turned his head and glanced at him. With a light wave of her hand, she removed all of the talismans on Mu Xingqian's body. The meteor shower above their heads also slowly dissipated, leaving only a trace of terrifying pressure in the air, proving that everything just now was not a dream. "Mississippi, how did the Mu family offend you? Can you tell me?" "Elder brother." Mu Roi was about to go crazy from anxiety. Elder brother's persistence today seemed very unusual. He clearly knew that the girl did not like the Mu family, but he still kept pestering her. Arbor's cold gaze shot behind him. Scram! The little white snake on his wrist flew out and rolled in the sky in an instant, turning into a ferocious giant snake bigger than a mountain range. Its tail swept down, and there was a loud boom. Half of the mountain top here was shocked by the terrifying vibrations. The little spirit beasts in the forest all hugged their heads and screamed, trembling as they knelt on the ground. The terrifying pressure of the ancient great void serpent shrouded the entire mountain top. Which spirit beast dared to act rashly? Mu Roi was so shocked that she fell on her butt. Looking back, Kuang Zhan and the other men were already crouching on the ground in fright. Their eyes were filled with terror as they stared in front of them. The giant snake coiled its huge body and floated in the air. Its long tail gently wrapped around the girl. In front of such a giant snake, she was so small that she could be ignored. However, it was this girl with an emotionless expression, who was coldly looking at all of them from across a deep ravine. Gully. The giant snake's tail had directly carved out a huge bottomless crack from left to right on this perfectly fine hillside. If any of them accidentally fell, they would not be able to cry even if they wanted to. Emolian slowly walked up and lowered his head to look at that deep crevice. He then raised his head to look at the bewildered Mu Xingqian, before letting out a long sigh. The gap between Jojo and the Mu family was like a ravine in front of them. The conflict was so deep that it was impossible to cross it. Mu Xingqian didn't know why, but when he looked at the little girl's emotionless face and her eyes that were as cold as 1,000 years of frost, his heart felt extremely uncomfortable. You can leave now, Emolian said to Mu Xingqian. She stepped forward and gently held Arbor's bone-chilling hand. A warm stream of energy flowed from his palm to hers. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and looked at Qin Lai's eyes, which were as dark as night. Do you want to eat osmanthus candy? Emolian took out a small, square silver box and gently waved it in front of her. I'm not a child, Arbor mumbled and stuffed a small piece of osmanthus candy into her mouth. How is it? Not bad, right? Emolian smiled and held her little hand. Then, she turned and walked towards Zhou Huan and the others, who were frozen stiff. The giant snake's cold gaze fell on Mu Xingqian for a moment. Then, it turned into a little white snake and flew up to Arbor's wrist again. Sweet. The little girl wrinkled her little nose. Emolian reached out and poked her little face. Of course it's sweet. Because when I made this osmanthus candy, I wrapped all my blessings in it. Chapter 2339. Arbor stared blankly for a moment before looking up at him. You made this? Yes. Emolian nodded with a smile. Jojo gave me a pot of flowers, so I naturally had to return the favor. Arbor pursed his lips and silently reached out his little paw to take the small silver box from his father's hand. He expressionlessly stuffed it into his little waist pouch. Emolian burst into laughter and suddenly picked up the little fellow. Jojo, are you happy? I'm all right. Arbor nodded his little head and gave him a lively look. Emolian laughed heartily, picked up the little fellow, and ran into the depths of the forest. We'll set up camp here tonight. What he didn't say was that his little emperor had made such a big commotion earlier, so he was sure that no spirit or profound beast would dare to come to their camp to die at night. Phew! Zhou Huan and the others let out a long sigh of relief. It was only now that they came back to their senses. When eldest Miss was angry earlier, they all felt as if there was a heavy aura pressing down on their hearts, causing them to keep quiet out of fear. They didn't even dare to utter a single word. It was only now that they felt a trace of the warmth of spring and the blooming of flowers, that looking at the giant snake that suddenly appeared. Its aura was so strong that they had never seen or heard of it before. It was only now that they understood that they had only seen 1,000th of eldest Mrs. Methods. Mu Roi finally collected her emotions and walked towards her brother Mu Xingqian, who was standing there in a daze. She lightly coughed and said, Big brother, big brother? Mu Xingqian suddenly turned his head and said to her, Roi, take them and continue to look for those ores in the 8 desolate mountain range. I'm going home first. Ah, big brother, you. Mu Roi opened her small mouth and was about to ask her brother why he was going back, but she saw that Mu Xingqian had already summoned his flying beast, Song Shui, a divine beast, 6-winged blood lion. He turned around and quickly flew into the sky. Big brother! Big brother! Mu Roi looked at the sky in shock. After a while her small face fell. What elder brother did today was really too illogical. She raised her eyes and looked at the deep trench in front of everyone. She let out a long sigh, turned around, and decisively led the Berserker mercenary group and the Mu family away. If that young lady was serious, none of them would be able to leave this place alive. The night passed in silence. In the middle of the night, Arbor hid in Paradise Planet. He drew a lot of talismans and cultivated for a while. Then, he returned to his tent, feeling refreshed. At this time, the first glimmer of dawn had already appeared. A familiar aroma of porridge slowly drifted into her tent and lingered in her nose. Arbor reached out and lifted the curtain. Under the morning light, she saw a man dressed in a plain robe. He seemed to have sensed her presence and turned his head. A hint of gentleness flashed across his face as he reached out and beckoned to her. Her lotus! Miss Chiao's eyes lit up. She shuttled forward like a little butterfly and threw herself into his embrace. She rubbed her little face against his clothes and suddenly raised her little head. She stared at him with sparkling eyes and said, You didn't wipe your face. It stinks. Emolian was about to laugh out loud, and he leaned over to kiss her small face. Who told you to be my wife? I can despise anyone, but I can't despise you. Arbor grinned and reached out a pair of small hands to hang on him. She rubbed against him for a while. I'll rub you together. It stinks. Chapter 2340. After breakfast, Old Man Shin ate and drank to his heart's content. With a face full of joy, he continued his journey towards the outskirts of the 8 desolate mountain range. Their next stop was naturally the southern part of the city. If they hadn't encountered an incident like yesterday, they would have probably reached the southern part of the city by dusk. Old Man Shin was a shrewd person. At this time, he understood that the young masters and young misses accompanying them were not simple people. He only needed to focus on driving the carriage. As for the rest, he would naturally leave it to the young masters and young misses. Arbor sat in the carriage and flipped through the medical book for a while before putting it away. She lifted the curtain and poked her head out. Husband. Amen. Mo Lien slightly tightened his grip on the reins and turned to look at her. There. Mo Lien turned to look and saw a stalk of medicinal herb growing under a banyan tree. It looked to be in good condition. Okay. Arbor watched as he whipped the horse forward and straightforwardly picked up the medicinal herb and handed it to her. Miss Chow blinked and gave him a sweet smile that she didn't even notice. The beautiful smile on her palm-sized face instantly captivated Prince Mo's eyes. Husband, why do you keep looking at me? Jojo is good-looking. Mo Lien wanted to abandon the horse and get on the carriage. However, when he thought about how his little wife could order him to pick the medicinal herb at any time, he extinguished that strong urge. Husband, I'm going to sleep for a while. Okay, I'll call you when it's time for lunch. The two of them looked at each other. Seeing the little fellow's sticky eyes, Mo Lien couldn't help but raise his hand to touch her little face. Woo! I really want to hug her and keep her in my arms. Forget it. I'll let the little fellow sleep for a while. Arbor retracted her little neck. Just as she was about to close her eyes and rest, she suddenly felt a golden flash in her conscious. The little fellow, who was familiar with the routine, couldn't help but feel happy. Looking at this situation, it seemed that the golden talisman jade tome was about to release a new technique. Could it be that her diligent practice of drawing talismans had some results? Could she now learn the contents of the 9th jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome? She was very happy as she waited for the golden talisman jade tome to release a new jade slip, so that she could learn the earth-grade talisman technique. Suddenly, a talisman flew out of nowhere. Miss Chow glanced at it. The talismans that could be stored in her inner world were naturally drawn by her own hands. Of course, she only needed a glance to recognize this soul-departing talisman. However, why would it fly out of its inner world on its own today? Arbor was gathering a strand of his spiritual sense, intending to control his lazy spiritual sense avatar, to check on the golden talisman jade tome in his conscious. Suddenly, a blue light burst out in front of him. That inexplicable and strange soul-leaving talisman suddenly rushed towards her glabella. Arbor was too shocked to react. The soul-departing talisman was a talisman that allowed the soul to leave the body and speed up the cultivation of the soul sense. The problem was, why did this soul separation talisman suddenly appear at this time? A talisman force rushed into her glabella, without any explanation. Arbor's eyes were filled with shock as she realized that she was drifting away from her body, pulled out by an indescribably tyrannical force. Bang! The body in the carriage fell to the ground without any reaction. Arbor's soul thought brushed past Prince Mo, who was galloping over on his horse. Prince Mo suddenly pulled on the reins of his horse and looked in the direction where Arbor was drifting away. There was nothing at all. He lifted the curtain of the carriage. What happened to Jojo? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.